the universe is infinite, does anything we do actually matter? Tonight, let's think about something that's both beautiful and a little unsettling. The idea that the universe might be infinite. When we say infinite, we mean that it has no edges, no walls, no stopping point where you could turn around and say, well, that's it. I've reached the end. Instead, it stretches on forever, in every direction. If that's true, it's not just big, it's beyond big, beyond what we can really imagine. And if the universe is that vast, endless, it's easier to wonder, do my choices matter? Do my actions mean anything at all? Let's start with the scale of things. You are one person, one human being, on a small blue planet, orbiting a star that's just one of hundreds of billions in our galaxy. And our galaxy is just one of billions, maybe trillions, in the observable universe. And that's only what we can see. Now imagine that beyond what we can see, there's more. And beyond that, more still. An ocean without shores. A sky that never stops. If you've ever looked up at the stars and felt small, you're not alone. Most people do. And that feeling can be humbling, but also a little bit lonely. Because in an infinite universe, our lives can feel like tiny sparks. They flash for a moment, and then disappear. In 100 years, almost everyone alive today will be gone. In 1,000,000 years, even the mountains will be different. In 1 billion years, the sun itself will fade. And in an infinite universe, those changes barely register at all. So, does that mean nothing matters? Well, it depends on how you define matter. If by matter we mean leave a permanent mark on the universe, then maybe not. Even the largest things we do, building cities, writing books, discovering new worlds, will eventually fade. The universe will keep going, with or without us. But there's another way to think about it. What if matter means affecting the small part of the universe you can actually touch? Think about throwing a pebble into a pond. The ripples spread outward. They get smaller and smaller until they disappear. But while they're there, they change the surface of the water. And if that pond is home to fish or plants or tiny insects, those ripples might be a big deal for them. Your life is like that pebble. You create ripples in the people around you, in your family, your friends, even strangers you meet once and never again. Those ripples may not reach the far edges of the universe, but they reach the edges of someone's world, and that's enough to matter to them. In an infinite universe, every possibility might exist somewhere. There might be another version of you, somewhere out there, making different choices, living a different life. That thought can make you feel small, but it can also make you feel special, because this version of you right here is unique to this place and this moment. Your kindness exists only here. Your voice, your laugh, the way you think about things, they exist in this reality at this time. And that's something even infinity can't take away. Philosophers say that meaning isn't something the universe gives us. It's something we create. The stars don't care if you fall in love, or write a song, or help someone in need. But the person you help cares. The one you love cares. You care. And maybe that's all that's needed. In fact, the very size of the universe can be a reason to cherish small moments. Because they're rare. Out of all the places in infinity, you're here, awake, alive, breathing in this moment. And the odds of that happening, if you think about it, are almost impossible. So maybe the question isn't, does anything we do matter in an infinite universe? Maybe it's, does it matter to me and to the people whose lives I touch? If the answer is yes, then maybe that's enough. Because while infinity might stretch forever, your time here does not. And that's what gives it weight. That's what makes the choice to be kind, to love, to create, to learn, meaningful. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember, you may be small compared to the universe, but your life is the entire universe to you, and the moments you create ripple out further than you might ever see. In the endless, boundless night sky, you are a brief light, and for those who see you, that light matters. Would you still be you if all your memories were replaced? Let's imagine something strange for a moment. You wake up one morning, and every memory you've ever had is gone. Not just gone, replaced. They're swapped out for an entirely different set of memories. You remember living in a city you've never seen before. You remember parents who aren't your real parents. You remember speaking a language you've never heard until now. Everything you think you know about your life isn't actually yours. Would you still be you? At first, it sounds like a question from a science fiction story, but philosophers have wrestled with it for centuries because it touches the heart of something deeply personal. What makes you, you? Many people believe our identity is built out of our memories. They are the threads that weave together our life story. Without them, the story unravels. Childhood, friendships, heartbreaks, triumphs, all the little moments that shaped us, they live inside those memories. If you take them away or replace them, are you still the same person? Let's think about how your memories work. Your brain is not a perfect camera. Memories aren't stored like photographs, frozen in time. They're living, changing things. Every time you recall a memory, your brain reconstructs it, and sometimes tiny details shift. In a way, we are already walking around with memories that have been edited, not by someone else, but by our own minds. Still, there's a difference between a memory that changes slowly over the years and every single memory being replaced in one instant. If that happened, your personality might change, your habits, your fears, your sense of humor, all of these are shaped, at least partly, by the life you remember living. Without those same life events, you might not laugh at the same jokes, you might not feel drawn to the same people. But here's the strange part. From inside your new mind, it might not feel strange at all. If you remember having always loved the ocean, you might feel a strong urge to visit the beach, and even if, in reality, you grew up far from water, your new memories would feel just as real as your old ones once did. So who's the real you? One way to look at it is to separate you into two parts. The self you experience right now, your thoughts, emotions, and awareness in this moment. The story you tell yourself about who you are, built from memories of the past. If your memories change, the story changes, but the self in this moment, the one listening to my words, breathing in and out, feeling the weight of your body against the bed, is still here. It's possible that you are less about the past and more about the ongoing experience of being alive. Another way to think about it. Imagine meeting someone who has amnesia. They can't recall anything about their past, but they still smile, they still speak, they still react to the world around them. They're still someone. You might even get to know and care about them as a person, even without their history. This suggests that identity isn't just made of memories. It's also made of how you respond to the present moment. On the other hand, memories give us a sense of continuity, a feeling that the you of 10 years ago is the same person as the you right now. Without that thread connecting past to present, you might feel like a stranger to yourself. That's why the idea of losing or replacing memories can feel so disturbing. It threatens the link between who we were and who we are, but maybe you are more flexible than you think. Over time, even without your original memories, you could form new ones. You could build fresh connections, new preferences, and new relationships, and those in turn would create a new version of you, different from the old but still fully human. In that way, the question, would you still be you, might not have a simple yes or no answer. It might be that you would still be a you, just not the same you as before. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, think about your own memories. Think about the small moments that have shaped you, your first friend, your favorite teacher, the scent of your home when you were young. Imagine them like little lights in the darkness, strung together, into the constellation of you. Now imagine that constellation rearranging itself into a new shape. The stars are the same size, the same brightness, but they tell a different story. Would it still be your sky, or would it belong to someone else entirely? Maybe the answer is that you are both the lights and the pattern they make. Change one, and you change the other. But either way, you're still here, experiencing the mystery of being alive. And that might be the truest version of you there is. Is reality something we create in our minds, or does it exist outside of us? Tonight, let's take a slow walk through a question that has puzzled philosophers, scientists, and curious people for thousands of years. When you look at the world around you, the room you're in, the sound of my voice, the feeling of your body resting, what exactly is it that you're experiencing? Is it a real solid world out there, or is it something your mind is creating in here? On the surface, the answer feels obvious. Of course, reality exists outside of us. You can touch it, measure it, share it with other people. The chair you're sitting on is real whether you think about it or not. The moon is real whether you look at it or not. But when you look a little closer, things start to feel less certain. Everything you know about the world comes to you through your senses. You see shapes and colours through your eyes. You hear sounds through your ears. You feel textures through your skin. But those senses aren't giving you the world directly. They're sending signals to your brain, and your brain is doing the rest. Think about colour. There's no such thing as red out in the world. What exists is light, bouncing off surfaces in different wavelengths. Your eyes detect those wavelengths and your brain turns them into the experience of red. If your brain works differently, you might see something else entirely, or think about sound. A bird's song isn't actually sound in the air, it's just vibrations. Your ears pick up those vibrations, and your brain interprets them as a pleasant melody. Without your brain to translate them, those vibrations would just pass through the air unnoticed. This means that what we call reality is always filtered and shaped by the mind. In a sense, you are living inside your brain's best guess at what's out there. Now here's where it gets even stranger. If two people look at the same thing, they might still experience it differently. One person might find the sound of rain peaceful, another might find it sad. The rain itself hasn't changed, but the experience of it has. Our personal history, emotions and memories all shape how we experience the world. Some philosophers, like George Berkeley, took this idea to an extreme. He argued that reality might only exist in the mind, that there is no outside world at all, just perceptions. In his view, the tree in your backyard isn't made of wooden leaves. It's made of the ideas and images in your mind. Other thinkers push back, saying that even if our minds shape the way we experience reality, there still has to be something out there causing those experiences. Otherwise, how could we all interact with the same world, share the same space, and affect one another? Science often takes this second view. It treats reality as something that exists independently, and our senses as tools for measuring it. But even scientists admit that our tools, our eyes, our instruments, even our language, are imperfect. We never get the raw universe. We always get a version of it that's been filtered, interpreted, and translated into something we can understand. So maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Maybe reality is a partnership between what's out there and what's in here. The outside world provides the raw material, light, sound, texture, energy, and our minds build it into a world we can live in. Think of it like music. A song is written as notes on a page. That's the outside world. But each musician plays it a little differently. That's the mind. The song exists in both places, as the notes that are fixed and as the performance that changes. This question, whether reality exists outside of us or inside us, might never be answered fully, and maybe that's okay, because no matter which is true, our experience of reality is the only one we'll ever have. The world as you know it is built from the colours you see, the sounds you hear, the thoughts you think, and whether those come from outside or inside, they are real to you. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, take a moment to notice the feeling of being here, the weight of the blankets, the rhythm of your breathing, the sound of these words in your mind. Whether this moment is being created by the universe outside or by the mind inside, it is happening. It is yours. And maybe, in the end, that's what reality really is, the thing we are living right now. If free will is an illusion, is anyone truly responsible for their actions? Let's start with a simple question. When you decide to do something, say, to get a glass of water, who made that decision? You might think, I did. You felt thirsty, you thought about water, and you chose to get up and get it. It feels like a clear example of free will. But what if that feeling is just an illusion? Some scientists and philosophers suggest that everything we do is shaped entirely by things we don't control. Our genes, our upbringing, the environment around us, even tiny events in our brains that happen before we're aware of them. If that's true, then maybe we're not choosing at all. We're just following a path laid out by causes that go back to the beginning of time. Think about it. You didn't choose your parents, the time and place you were born, or the culture you grew up in. You didn't choose your basic personality, your natural talents, or your deepest fears. All of these things influence the way you act. If you'd been born into a completely different life, in a different country, with different parents, speaking a different language, you might be a completely different person. Even your moment-to-moment choices might not be as free as they feel. Studies have shown that your brain can start preparing for an action before you consciously decide to do it. By the time you think, I've decided, your brain has already begun the process. So if free will is an illusion, what does that mean for responsibility? Can we really hold someone accountable for their actions if they couldn't have acted differently? On one side, you could argue that responsibility doesn't make sense without free will. If every action is the result of things outside our control, then blaming someone for what they did is like blaming the wind for knocking over a tree. The wind had no choice. But on the other side, society depends on some idea of responsibility. We punish harmful actions not just to assign blame, but to protect others, to discourage future harm, and to encourage better behavior. Even if someone's actions were caused by forces beyond their control, holding them accountable can still serve a purpose. It's a bit like training a dog. The dog doesn't have free will in the human sense. It acts based on instincts, training, and the environment. But we still teach it what's acceptable and what's not, because that shapes future behavior. Some philosophers take a middle ground. They say that even if we don't have absolute free will, we can still talk about responsibility in terms of how our actions fit into the bigger picture. You may not have chosen your nature, but you can still be part of the cause and effect chain that changes things for the better or worse. There's also the idea of practical freedom. Even if your choices are shaped by past events, you still experience them as choices. You still weigh options, think about consequences, and act according to your values. That lived experience of decision-making might be enough for us to meaningfully talk about responsibility. Think of it like playing a game where the rules and the pieces are set from the start. You didn't choose the game, but you can still play it skillfully or poorly. You can still make moves that help or harm others. And in that sense, your actions still matter. This question, whether free will is real, doesn't just challenge how we see others, but how we see ourselves. If we believe that everything we do is determined, we might feel powerless. But we could also see it another way. Every small good act you perform is part of a chain of events that can ripple outward, shaping the future. Even if those acts were inevitable, they still change the world in real ways. As you close your eyes tonight, think about the choices you made today. Maybe some were automatic. Maybe others felt deeply considered. Whether they were truly free or not, they are part of your story and part of the stories of everyone you touched. And perhaps, in the end, the question isn't whether we have absolute free will. It's how we use the moments we experience as choice to create a life we can be at peace with. Could the world around you be nothing more than a simulation? Tonight, let's step into an idea that feels like it came straight from a science fiction movie, but has been seriously considered by scientists and philosophers alike. The thought that everything you see, hear, and touch might not be real in the way you think it is. What if the world around you is a simulation? When we say simulation, imagine something like a hyper-realistic video game. The characters move and speak, the environment changes with weather and time, and everything feels solid. But behind the scenes, it's all lines of code and digital data, controlled by something or someone you can't see. At first, the idea sounds wild, but let's think about why some people take it seriously. Technology is moving incredibly fast. Just a few decades ago, video games were made of simple blocks and beeps. Now they have worlds so detailed you can see the dust in the air and hear the rustle of leaves. Virtual reality headsets can make you feel like you're standing somewhere else entirely. If technology keeps improving, it's not hard to imagine a future where simulations become so advanced they're indistinguishable from reality. Every sound, every sight, every sensation could be perfectly recreated. And if we could create such simulations, who's to say it hasn't already been done? Some thinkers, like philosopher Nick Bostrom, argue that if it's possible to create a perfect simulation of reality, it might actually be more likely that we're living in one than not. In his view, there could be countless simulated worlds, each with billions of simulated people, and only one real world. That would make the odds of you being in the real one very small. So how could you tell? That's the tricky part. Everything you experience, the sound of my voice, the feeling of the bed beneath you, is processed by your brain. If the simulation is perfect, those experiences would feel exactly the same as they do now. You could live your whole life without noticing a single glitch. Some people look for clues. They wonder if certain strange patterns in nature or limits in physics might be like the rules of a computer program. They point to quantum mechanics, where particles behave unpredictably until observed, as something that feels a bit like how video games only render what's in front of you to save energy. Others think about déjà vu, that sudden, eerie feeling that you've experienced a moment before, and wonder if it could be a glitch in the system. Of course, there are perfectly natural explanations for déjà vu, but the simulation idea gives it a mysterious twist. If we really were in a simulation, the big question is who or what is running it? Are we part of a scientific experiment run by a far more advanced civilization? Are we characters in someone's game? Are we just a story unfolding for entertainment? The possibilities are endless and a little unsettling. But here's another way to look at it. Even if reality was simulated, would it change the way you live? Your emotions would still feel real, your relationships would still matter, pain would still hurt, and joy would still make you smile. The sunsets you see would still be beautiful, even if they were made of pixels. In fact, we already live in a kind of personal simulation, the version of reality our brains create for us. Your eyes don't see the raw world, they take in light and your brain builds an image. Your ears don't hear the actual events, they pick up vibrations and your brain turns them into sound. We're always experiencing a translation, never the direct thing. So whether the universe is built from atoms or from code, your experience of it is still your reality, and that makes it meaningful. Maybe the point isn't to know for sure whether we're in a simulation. Maybe it's to live fully in whatever reality we have, to notice the moments of kindness, the beauty in nature, the comfort of love, simulated or not. So as you close your eyes tonight, picture the world fading into a quiet darkness, like a computer screen going to sleep. But instead of feeling small or uncertain, feel curious. Feel grateful for the chance to explore this strange, detailed, mysterious reality, whatever it's made of, because whether it's the only reality or one of many, it's the one you're in right now, and that makes it yours. If everything eventually fades into nothingness, what is the point of existence? This question has a quiet heaviness to it. It's the kind of thought that drifts into your mind late at night, when the noise of the day has settled and you're left alone with your own reflections. If, in the end, all things disappear, what's the point of doing anything at all? The truth is, time doesn't stop for anyone. Every living thing you know will someday be gone. Our bodies will return to the earth. The buildings we build will crumble. Even the mountains will slowly erode into the sea. And far beyond us, the stars will burn out, and the universe itself will one day grow cold and empty. So, with that in mind, why do we get up in the morning? Why laugh, love, or work toward anything? One way to think about it is this. Maybe the meaning of life isn't found in its permanence, but in its impermanence. We often imagine that for something to matter, it must last forever. But that's not always true. A song doesn't lose its beauty because it ends. A sunset isn't less breathtaking because night will soon follow. The very fact that moments are temporary is what makes them precious. Think about the people you care about. You know they won't be here forever, and neither will you. That's exactly why your time together matters so deeply. You hold on to the memories, you try to make them count, because you know they're fragile. If everything were endless, maybe nothing would feel urgent. There would be no reason to hold a loved one close, to watch the rain with quiet appreciation, or to chase your dreams before they slip away. The clock is ticking, and strangely that ticking is what gives life its shape. There's also the idea that meaning isn't something given to us from outside, it's something we create. The universe might not hand you a clear instruction manual, it may not whisper a grand purpose into your ear, but in that moment you get to decide. Maybe your meaning is found in kindness, in making someone's day a little lighter. Maybe it's in creating art, growing a garden, or raising a child. Maybe it's simply in being present and noticing the details of your life. The warmth of a cup of tea, the weight of a blanket, the sound of rain against your window, even if everything fades. Those moments still happened. They still shaped you. They still shaped others. There's a quiet truth here. Meaning doesn't have to be eternal to be real. Imagine a flower blooming in spring. It opens for a few short weeks, soaking in the sunlight, drawing bees with its bright colour. Then it withers. Was its existence pointless because it didn't last forever? Or did it have meaning in that brief time, feeding insects, adding beauty to the world, existing fully for as long as it could? In a way, we are all like that flower. We live for a moment in the vast timeline of the universe. We can't change the fact that our time is short, but we can choose to bloom while we're here. Some people find comfort in thinking that while individual things fade, their effects ripple outward. The smile you gave someone might brighten their day. That brighter day might make them kinder to another person. That small act could change a chain of events you'll never see. It's like tossing a stone into a pond. The ripples go farther than you might imagine. And even if the ultimate future is nothingness, that doesn't erase the somethingness of now. We live in this moment, not in the far-off cold of the universe's end. And this moment is alive, filled with colours, sounds, and feelings. If you focus only on the fact that it will end, you miss the fact that it's here, right now. So maybe if the point of existence isn't to escape nothingness, maybe it's to fill the space between nothingness with as much life as you can. To live like the sunset, knowing it will vanish, but burning bright anyway. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, try to let that thought settle in your mind. The end may be inevitable, but the story you write until then is yours to create. You can fill it with love, curiosity, laughter, and connection. You can choose to notice the small wonders that pass through your days. Because even if the universe forgets, you will have lived them, and for you in this time, in this place, that is enough. Do we have a moral duty to prevent our own species from going extinct? It's a question that sits at the intersection of ethics, survival, and the big picture of our place in the universe. Most of us take it for granted that humanity will keep going, that there will always be people walking the earth, laughing, loving, and dreaming. But history tells us nothing lasts forever. Entire species that once thrived have vanished, and one day we could be among them. So the question is, should we fight to make sure that never happens? Is it our moral responsibility to ensure humanity continues? Or is it just a natural part of life for species to rise and fall? Let's start with the argument for yes. Many people believe that preserving our species is not just instinct, but duty. We've built cultures, languages, art, and science over thousands of years. We've created meaning, developed values, and formed deep bonds across generations. To let all of that end would be like burning the only library in the universe that holds our story. From this perspective, protecting humanity is an act of respect, not only for those alive now, but for everyone who came before us. Think of the sacrifices people have made to give future generations a chance. Parents working tirelessly to raise their children, scientists curing diseases, explorers risking their lives to expand knowledge. If we simply stopped caring whether humanity continues, wouldn't that make all of those efforts feel wasted? There's also the idea that we might be unique. As far as we know, there's no other intelligent life like us in the universe, at least not within our reach. That means the ability to think, create, and imagine the way we do could be incredibly rare. If we disappeared, those abilities might vanish forever. Some see that as a loss too great to accept. On the other hand, there are those who question whether this duty really exists at all. From a purely natural view, extinction is normal. More than 99% of all species that have ever lived are now gone. Dinosaurs ruled the planet for over 150 million years before vanishing. The Earth didn't stop spinning. Life moved on. In that sense, our eventual disappearance might not be a tragedy, just a continuation of the planet's story. And then there's the uncomfortable thought. What if humanity isn't a force for good in the long run? We've created beauty, yes, but also destruction. We've driven other species to extinction, altered the climate, and built weapons capable of wiping out millions in moments. If preventing our extinction means continuing these patterns, is that really the moral choice? Still, even if we've made mistakes, many would argue that our potential outweighs our flaws. Humans can learn, adapt, and change. We can make choices that protect the planet instead of harm it. Maybe the real moral duty isn't just to survive, but to survive better, to ensure future humans live in ways that honor both each other and the Earth. So how would we even go about fulfilling this supposed duty? It could mean safeguarding against big risks, things like nuclear war, pandemics, or asteroid impacts. It might involve protecting our environment so it can continue to support life. It could also mean exploring beyond our planet, finding ways for humanity to live in more than one place, so we're not vulnerable to a single disaster. But moral duty is more than just survival plans and technology. It's also about values. It asks, what kind of people will we be if we do survive? What stories will we pass down? Will we carry forward kindness, creativity, and care, or greed, fear, and division? Perhaps the real answer is that our moral responsibility isn't simply to avoid extinction, but to make our existence worth saving. To live in a way that if some far-off being discovered traces of us, they would think, this species mattered. As you let this thought drift in your mind, imagine Earth, thousands of years from now. Maybe humanity is still here, spread across worlds, telling stories under alien skies. Or maybe the planet has gone quiet, the cities crumbled, the oceans reclaimed the land. Which future feels right to you? Which one feels like the story you'd want to help write? Maybe that's where the answer lies, not in a rule written in the stars, but in the choice we make about who we want to be. If we believe there is beauty, value, and meaning in human life, then perhaps the duty to protect it is clear. If we believe there's still more good we can bring into the universe, then perhaps we should fight to ensure our story continues, not forever, but for as long as we can write it. And if the day comes when it ends, let it be because the book has been fully written, not because we let the pages burn before the story was done. Could it be better if humanity had never existed? It's not the most cheerful question, but it's one worth exploring. When we think about humanity's place in the universe, we often focus on our achievements, our art, our inventions, our acts of kindness. But there's another side to the story, one that asks, what if the world might have been better off without us? Let's start with why someone might say yes. Humans have brought extraordinary beauty into the world, but we've also brought incredible harm. We've waged wars that wiped out millions. We've caused suffering to other humans and to animals on a scale that's hard to measure. Entire species have disappeared because of us. We've cut down forests, polluted oceans, and altered the climate in ways that will last for centuries. If you imagine the Earth without our people, you might picture endless wilderness. Forests stretching to the horizon, oceans teeming with life, skies filled with birds. In this view, without humans, the planet could have stayed in balance. No oil spills, no factory smoke, no nuclear weapons, just nature, doing what it has always done. Some philosophers even argue from a moral standpoint. They say that because life involves suffering and because humans are capable of such deep awareness of that suffering, maybe it would have been better if we never existed at all. In this way of thinking, no humans means no human pain, no grief, no heartbreak. But there's another side to consider. For all our flaws, humanity has also created things of astonishing value. We've painted ceilings in cathedrals, composed music that can bring people to tears, and told stories that travel across generations. We've learned to understand the stars, to map the deep ocean, to cure diseases that once destroyed entire communities. Without us, none of that would exist. There would be no Shakespeare, no symphonies, no space exploration. The Earth would still turn, but the universe would be a little quieter, missing the voices that ask questions about its mysteries. There's also the possibility that humanity's existence has ripple effects we can't see. Maybe, someday, we'll solve problems that currently seem impossible. Maybe we'll spread life to other planets, giving Earth's living creatures a chance to survive even if this planet one day can't. Without humans, those future possibilities vanish. And then there's a more personal truth. Most of us feel that our lives, and the lives of the people we love, matter. Yes, there's pain, there's cruelty, but there's also laughter, friendship, the warmth of a hug, the joy of seeing something beautiful for the first time. If you ask someone who has known real love whether it would have been better if they'd never lived at all, many would still say no. Still, this question doesn't have an easy answer. It asks us to weigh suffering against joy, destruction against creation. It forces us to step outside our own perspective and think about the planet, and maybe even the universe as a whole. If we take a completely cold, detached view, maybe the Earth without humans would indeed be healthier, more peaceful. But humans don't only harm, we can heal. We can restore forests, protect species, clean oceans, and learn from our mistakes. We can also create meaning, something nature itself doesn't seem to do in the same way we do. So maybe the real question isn't, would it have been better if we never existed? But, given that we do exist, can we make it better now? Because we can't erase our presence from history, but we can shape our future. If we choose to focus on kindness, on repairing what we've damaged, on creating rather than destroying, perhaps our existence can become something undeniably worth having. And if we can tip the balance toward joy instead of pain, toward beauty instead of ruin, then maybe, just maybe, the answer shifts from "it would have been better without us" to "it's better because we are here." As you let this thought drift, picture two Earths, one without us, green, wild, untouched. One with us, but in this vision, we've learned to live in harmony with the world, protecting and cherishing it. Which one feels more right to you? Which one do you want to work toward? Perhaps the answer isn't found in what could have been, but in what still can be. Is consciousness just an accident of evolution? It's one of those questions that can keep you awake at night, even if you were just trying to drift off. You're lying there thinking about your own thoughts, and then it hits you. Why do I even have thoughts? Why am I aware that I exist? Is my consciousness some incredible purposeful feature of life, or is it just a strange side effect of evolution, like a bonus we never really needed? Let's start with the basics. Evolution works through natural selection. Traits that help an organism survive and reproduce tend to get passed on. Over millions of years, these traits shape every living thing, from the speed of a cheetah to the camouflage of a chameleon. Consciousness, the ability to be aware, to think, to reflect, could be seen as one of those traits. If that's true, then consciousness must have given our ancestors some kind of advantage. Maybe it helped them plan ahead, work together, or outsmart predators. Being able to imagine the future, remember the past, and share ideas could have meant the difference between life and death. In that view, consciousness isn't an accident. It's a survival tool that evolution fine-tuned. But here's where things get tricky. We could, in theory, survive without the kind of self-awareness we have now. Many animals thrive without it. They eat, hunt, mate, and live perfectly well without lying awake at night wondering about the meaning of life. So some scientists suggest that consciousness might not be strictly necessary for survival. Instead, it could be a byproduct, what's sometimes called a spandrel in evolution. A spandrel is something that appears as a side effect of another useful trait. Think of it like this. The archways in a building might create triangular spaces above them. Those triangles weren't designed for a purpose. They just happen because the arch exists. Similarly, consciousness could have arisen as a side effect of our brains becoming complex enough to solve problems, use language, and remember events. In other words, maybe we didn't evolve because of consciousness. Maybe consciousness just happened once our brains reached a certain level of complexity, like steam rising from boiling water. It wasn't the goal, but it came with the process. That idea can feel unsettling. If consciousness is an accident, does it mean it's meaningless? Does it mean we're just chemical machines experiencing illusions of thought and choice? Some people find that idea bleak, almost dehumanizing. But there's another way to see it. Even if consciousness began as an accident, it has transformed into something deeply significant. Think about it. Art, music, love, curiosity. All of these come from our awareness. Whether or not evolution intended it, consciousness has allowed us to imagine things that don't exist, to dream about the future, and to question the universe itself. An accident can still lead to something extraordinary. There's also the mystery of why consciousness feels the way it does. We can measure brain activity, but we still don't know why it feels like something to be you. This is often called the hard problem of consciousness. Why do electrical signals in the brain produce subjective experience? If consciousness were purely an accident, it might suggest that this feeling, this inner life, is just a lucky or unlucky bonus. But maybe there's more to it than we can currently explain. Some theories go even further, suggesting consciousness isn't an accident at all, nor just a survival tool, but a fundamental part of the universe like space and time. In that view, evolution didn't create consciousness from nothing. It just shaped organisms that could tap into it. This is more of a philosophical or even spiritual take, but it shows just how mysterious the question really is. So is consciousness an accident of evolution? We don't have a final answer. It could be a carefully crafted advantage, the result of natural selection making us better at surviving. It could be a byproduct, an unintended side effect of building a brain so capable that it accidentally became self-aware. Or it could be something even bigger, something evolution didn't make so much as reveal. No matter which idea is true, one thing remains. Consciousness, accidental or not, is the lens through which we experience everything. Whether it's a planned masterpiece or a cosmic coincidence, it's what allows you to enjoy music, or feel love, or even wonder about your own existence. And maybe, in the end, the fact that we can ask this question is reason enough to treasure it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you might imagine the vast sweep of time, billions of years of life evolving, species coming and going, and realize that somehow, here you are, a thinking, feeling being. Accident or not, that's something worth marveling and sailing at. Could life have an ultimate purpose that we're incapable of understanding? It's a question that reaches beyond science, philosophy, and even imagination. Could there be a reason, a grand design for our existence, but one so far beyond our ability to grasp that we'll never truly understand it? Think about it this way. A dog might understand love, loyalty, and the sound of its owner's voice, but it can't understand the stock market or the theory of relativity or why humans build skyscrapers. Its mind simply isn't built for that kind of thinking. Now, imagine that we might be in a similar position, just a more advanced species, still limited by the structure of our brains. If there is an ultimate purpose to life, maybe it's so complex, so vast, that we're like ants trying to comprehend the concept of the internet. When we ask, what's the purpose of life? We often expect an answer in human terms, something that fits into our moral systems, our ideas about success, or our understanding of the universe. We might think it has to do with love, happiness, personal succor, growth, or helping others. But if the purpose is something entirely outside of what humans can conceive, our best guesses could all be wrong. Some philosophers and scientists suggest that even if there is a bigger picture, we might never be able to see it clearly. Our brains evolved to help us survive, not to uncover the secrets of ultimate meaning. We evolved to hunt, gather, build shelter, and raise children, and not to solve cosmic mysteries. The fact that we can even think about such things is amazing in itself, but thinking about them doesn't guarantee we can solve them. There's another angle to consider. What if the ultimate purpose of life is hidden in plain sight, but we can't recognize it because we're too close to it? It could be something woven into the very fabric of existence, something that every moment is contributing to without us realizing it. Imagine a single brushstroke in a massive painting. The brushstroke itself doesn't know what picture it's helping to create. It just exists where it is. Only someone who can see the entire canvas from a distance understands how that stroke fits in. Maybe we're like that brushstroke, part of a picture so big that only some higher perspectives, whatever that might be, can see it. For some people, this idea is comforting. If there's a purpose beyond our comprehension, then nothing is truly meaningless. Even our struggles and failures might play a role in something greater, something that matters on a level we can't measure. For others, it's frustrating. The idea that there might be a reason for everything, but we'll never get to know it, can feel like a cruel joke. It's like having a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. You can't tell what you're building, but you keep putting pieces together anyway. Some religious traditions touch on this idea by saying that divine will, or the plan of the universe, is beyond human understanding. In that view, the purpose of life might not be for us to fully know. It might be enough just to live it well, to play our part without needing all the answers. Meanwhile, certain scientific perspective has leaned toward the possibility that life might have no built-in purpose at all. But even then, some scientists admit that our current understanding of reality could be incomplete. The laws of physics, the nature of consciousness, the origins of the universe, there's still so much we don't know. It's possible that hidden within those unknowns is a clue to a larger purpose. If we accept that there could be an ultimate purpose beyond our comprehension, it raises a strange question. Does it matter if we understand it or not? If we can't grasp it, then maybe our role is simply to live the best way we can, and trust that whatever the bigger picture is, we're still part of it. Think of it like a single instrument in an orchestra. The violin doesn't know the full structure of the symphony. It just plays its notes, and together with all the other instruments, something beautiful emerges. Maybe life works the same way. Could life have an ultimate purpose we're incapable of understanding? The answer could be yes, or no, or something so different from our yes-no way of thinking that the question itself might be too small for the truth. And maybe, as you lie in bed tonight, you'll think about the strange mix of comfort and mystery in that possibility, that your life, every joy, every loss, every ordinary moment might be a thread in a vast tapestry, one that no single thread could ever see in full. What happens to the self after death, if it ever existed at all? The self feels so real. It's the voice in your head, The memories you carry, the feeling that you're you, a separate, unique being moving through the world. But if we look closely, the idea of a self gets blurry. Some philosophers and scientists argue that the self might be an illusion, a story our brain tells to tie together our thoughts, feelings, and experiences. In that case, asking what happens to the self after death is a bit like asking what happens to the center of a tornado when the wind stops. Still, illusion or not, it's an illusion we live inside every day. And death, the end of our body and brain, forces the question, what happens to that feeling of I? If the self is just the product of a living brain, then when the brain stops working, the self disappears, the same way a flame goes out when there's no more fuel. That's the view many scientists take. No brain activity, no mind, no self. In this picture, death is simply the end of the story with no continuation. But other perspectives suggest it's not so simple. Some religious and spiritual traditions see the self as more than the body and brain, as something that survives death in some form. They might call it the soul, spirit, or consciousness. In those views, the self moves on to another existence, perhaps an afterlife, reincarnation, or a return to some universal source. If that's true, then death is not the destruction of the self, but a transformation, like a river flowing into the ocean. It changes shape, but maybe the essence of it remains. There's also an interesting middle ground. Some scientists and philosophers wonder if consciousness could be more than just a product of the brain. Maybe the brain is more like a receiver, tuning into a field of awareness that exists beyond us. If so, then death might not erase the self completely. Instead, it might simply mean our individual signal is no longer being broadcast. In that case, what we think of as our self might dissolve back into a larger, shared consciousness. Your individual memories might fade, but the core of awareness, the raw experience of being Kurosawa, could remain in some form. But here's the twist. What if the self never really existed in the first place? Some Eastern philosophies, like Buddhism, teach the concept of no self, that our sense of I is a mental construction made from constantly changing thoughts, feelings, and sensations. There's no permanent, unchanging core, just a flowing process. From that view, death doesn't destroy the self, because there was no solid self to destroy. It's like asking what happens to a wave when it crashes. The wave was never a separate thing. It was always just part of the ocean. The form changes, but the water is still there. If we think about it this way, maybe death is simply the end of a particular arrangement of experiences. The body stops, the thoughts stop, the memories fade, but the deeper reality we're made of, whatever that is, doesn't vanish. It just stops appearing as us. This idea can be unsettling if you're attached to the idea of a permanent self, but it can also be strangely freeing. If the self is just a temporary pattern, then its ending isn't a personal tragedy. It's simply part of the natural flow of change. Of course, none of this can be proven with absolute certainty. We can't run experiments on what it's like to be dead, and if there's anything left of the self afterward, we can't interview it. We're left with possibilities. Maybe the self ends completely. Maybe it continues in another form. Maybe it never existed in the way we thought. Each possibility carries its own kind of comfort or discomfort. So what happens to the self after death? If it ever existed at all? We don't know. And maybe we can't know, but thinking about it has a strange side effect. It makes us look more closely at what the self is right now while we're still here. Is it the sum of your memories, the way you feel in this moment, the relationships you've built, or is it something deeper, harder to define? Whatever the answer, the self, real or illusion, is the lens through which we experience everything. And one day that lens will change or vanish, which makes the moments we have with it, with ourselves, all the more precious. If time travel were possible, could we ever change the past? Time travel has fascinated people for centuries. We see it in books, movies, and even in casual daydreams. The idea of going back to undo a mistake, prevent a tragedy, or simply see how things really happened. But if time travel were actually possible, could we really change the past? Or would the past be locked in place no matter what we did? The first thing to think about is what we even mean by changing the past. Right now, the past feels fixed. It already happened, and nothing can touch it. But if you could step into a machine and go back to, say, last week, You'd be physically in that moment again. You could talk to people, move things, maybe even stop something from happening. At first, it seems obvious that your actions would alter what comes next. If you stop a glass from falling, it doesn't break. If you stop a war from starting, millions of lives are saved. But here's the problem. If you can change the past, what happens to the version of history you came from? This leads to one of the most famous problems in time travel thinking, the grandfather paradox. Imagine you travel back in time and, for some reason, prevent your grandparents from meeting. If they never meet, they never have your parents, and that means you were never born. But if you were never born, you couldn't have traveled back in time to stop them from meeting. That's a contradiction, a loop that breaks itself. This paradox suggests that maybe you can't change the past, at least not in ways that create contradictions. In other words, anything you do in the past might have already been part of history all along. This is called the self-consistency principle, the idea that time travel might be possible, but you can only ever act in ways that fit with what has already happened. But there's another possibility. Some scientists and philosophers think that changing the past could be possible, if doing so creates a new timeline instead of rewriting the old one. In this multiverse idea, the moment you make a change in the past, you split off into a new reality where events happen differently. Your original timeline still exists, untouched, but you're now in a parallel version of history that has branched away. So if you went back and stopped a war, you'd create a timeline where that war never happened, but your own original timeline, the one you came from, would still have it. You wouldn't be fixing your own past, you'd just be creating a new one. Of course, this raises a big question. If that's how it works, could you ever really go home? If changing the past moves you into a different timeline, then your original version of the future might be forever out of reach. You'd be stuck in the world you've created, living with the consequences, good or bad, of your interference. There's also the idea that time itself might be more like a landscape than a river. In this view, all moments, both past, present, and future, exist at once, like different places on a map. You can move between them, but you can't erase them. You can visit the past, interact with it, even see it differently, but the original version of events is always there, unchangeable. That would mean your trip to the past is more like visiting a museum than rewriting a book. You can look and touch, but you can't repaint the walls. Even if time travel to the past were possible, there's another challenge: chaos theory. In complex systems, tiny changes can have huge unpredictable effects, the so-called butterfly effect. If you go back and make even a small change, stepping on a flower, speaking to someone you weren't supposed to, and it could ripple outward in ways you can't control, the smallest action could lead to an entirely different world. This is exciting, but also terrifying. It means you might try to improve the past and accidentally make it much worse. You might stop a tragedy but cause another one you never saw coming. So could we change the past? The answer might depend on which of these ideas is true. If the universe demands self-consistency, then no, you can't. If we live in a multiverse, then yes, but only in a new branch of reality. If time is a fixed landscape, then your actions in the past can't erase what happened. They just exist alongside it. And there's one last, slightly unsettling thought. Maybe time travel to the past is impossible, not because we lack the technology, but because changing the past would break reality in ways the universe simply doesn't allow. In that case, the past is safe forever, not because it's protected, but because it's simply unreachable. The dream of time travel often comes from longing, a wish to undo regrets or fix mistakes. But maybe the fact that we can't change the past is part of what makes the present so important. We can't rewrite what's behind us, but we can shape what comes next. And in a way, that's its own kind of time travel, moving forward, carrying the weight of what's been and deciding moment by moment what the future will hold. Is morality universal or just a human invention? From childhood, we're taught the difference between right and wrong. Share your toys, don't hurt people, tell the truth. These rules seem obvious, almost natural. But step back for a moment and ask, are these rules written into the very fabric of the universe, or are they simply ideas humans came up with to make life together easier? This is one of the oldest and most debated questions in philosophy. On one side, some believe morality is universal, meaning it exists independently of human opinion. On the other, some argue morality is a human invention, something we made up shaped by our cultures and circumstances. Let's start with the idea that morality is universal. If morality is the universal, means there's a set of moral truths that apply to everyone, everywhere, no matter what. Under this view, things like murder, cruelty, and lying are wrong not just because people say so, but because they violate deeper objective rules. Some religious traditions believe morality comes from a divine source, God, gods, or a higher spiritual law. For example, the Ten Commandments in Christianity, or the concept of Dharma in Hinduism. In this view, morality exists because a higher power created it, and humans are simply discovering or following those eternal laws. But even without religion, some philosophers argue for universal morality. They point to ideas like human rights, the belief that all people deserve basic freedoms and dignity simply because they're human. This isn't supposed to be a matter of opinion or culture. If someone in another country says slavery is acceptable, a universalist would argue they're simply wrong, in the same way they'd be wrong about saying 2 + 2 = 5. Now let's look at the other side, morality as a human invention. This view says that morality didn't come from the universe, it came from us. Early humans lived in small groups, and survival depended on cooperation. Over time, behaviors that helped the group, like sharing food or protecting each other, became valued, while behaviors that hurt the group, like stealing or killing, were discouraged. These rules weren't handed down from the heavens, they were the result of trial and error, shaped by what kept communities alive. And because different communities faced different challenges, they developed different moral systems. We see this when we look at history. Practices once considered normal, even moral, in one society, such as the arranged child marriages, public executions, or animal sacrifice, might be considered deeply wrong in another. This suggests that morality shifts with culture, time, and circumstance. From this perspective, morality is less like a law of physics and more like a language. Just as different societies speak different languages, they also have different moral languages, systems of rules and values that work for them but aren't necessarily universal. But here's where it gets tricky. Even if morality began as a human invention, that doesn't mean it's meaningless. Think of traffic laws. They're invented by people, but they serve a real purpose, keeping drivers safe. Whether you drive on the left or right side of the road isn't a matter of cosmic truth, but the rule still matters because it prevents chaos. Similarly, moral rules, even if invented, can still be incredibly important for keeping societies functional and fair. There's also a middle ground view. Morality might be partly universal, partly invented. Some moral instincts could be built into us by evolution. For example, empathy, the ability to feel what others feel, appears in humans and many animals. This could be a natural foundation for moral behavior, but how we express that empathy and the specific rules we build around it might vary from culture to culture. Under this hybrid view, there could be certain basic moral principles, like fairness or avoiding unnecessary harm, that exist across all societies, while the details are shaped by human invention. The debate also touches on deep questions about responsibility and judgment. If morality is universal, then we can say with confidence that some actions are wrong no matter what, and we can judge them across cultures and history. But if morality is a human invention, then judging other cultures becomes complicated. Who gets to decide which set of invented rules is right? For example, if one society believes in strict equality and another believes in rigid hierarchies, a universalist might say one is correct and the other is wrong. A moral relativist, someone who believes morality is invented, might say both are right in their own context, even if they conflict. And finally, there's the personal side. When you decide whether to tell a lie, help a stranger, or stand up for someone being treated unfairly, you might not be thinking about philosophy. You're making a choice in the moment, guided by your upbringing, your feelings, and your own sense of right and wrong. Whether those feelings are echoes of universal truths or products of human invention might be impossible to prove, but they still shape your life and the lives of everyone around you. So is morality universal or just a human invention? The truth might be that it's a little of both. Some moral instincts might be rooted in our biology and shared humanity, while others are shaped by the cultures and histories we live in. Whether written in the stars or scribbled in the margins of human history, morality remains one of the most powerful forces in our world, guiding our choices, shaping our societies, and forcing us to constantly ask, what is the right thing to do? Could eternal life be more terrifying than death? Most people at some point have wished for more time, more years to live, more moments with loved ones. The idea of eternal life, of living forever, can seem like the ultimate gift. No aging, no disease, no final goodbye. It sounds like the answer to all our fears about death. But if you look closer, the dream starts to shift. And in that shift, some people begin to wonder, could eternal life actually be worse than death? At first glance, living forever feels exciting. Think about it. Centuries to travel the world, master every skill, see technology advance beyond your imagination. You could read every book ever written, learn every language, meet generations of people yet to be born. There would always be something new to explore. But the key question is this: does new last forever? Or would it eventually run out? If you lived for millions of years, you might eventually experience everything worth experiencing. Every sight, every taste, every conversation. And once you've done it all, once the novelty fades, what's left? Some philosophers and writers warn that eternal life could lead to a crushing boredom that no new experience could fix. A kind of emptiness that comes not from too little time, but from too much. There's also the problem of loss. Even if you live forever, the people around you might not. You'd have to watch friends, family, and lovers age and die while you remain unchanged. Then you'd have to meet new people, only to lose them again, over and over. At first, maybe you'd tell yourself it's worth it for the time you get with them. But after centuries of saying goodbye, you might start closing yourself off, avoiding deep connections to protect yourself from grief. Eternal life could mean an eternity of loneliness. Some imagine a solution. What if everyone could live forever? Then no one would have to lose anyone. But this brings another terrifying thought of overpopulation. If no one dies, the world could become overcrowded, resources could run out and society could collapse. In that case, eternal life might mean living in a world that's no longer worth living in. And then there's the question of meaning. A lot of what makes life meaningful comes from the fact that it ends. Knowing that our time is limited pushes us to take chances, to love deeply, to work for something bigger than ourselves. We value moments because they are rare. If life never ended, the urgency to do anything might disappear. You could put off every goal, every dream, every conversation for tomorrow, because there would always be another tomorrow. Paradoxically, eternal life could make you care less about living. Of course, some people think these fears are exaggerated. They argue that humans are adaptable, that we'd find new ways to keep life interesting even over thousands of years. We might discover new art forms, explore other planets, or even evolve into entirely new kinds of beings. But there's another twist. What if eternal life didn't mean staying young and healthy forever? What if you kept aging, your body wearing down, your mind growing tired, but you couldn't die? That's not a dream, that's a nightmare. An endless existence trapped in a body that no longer works. This is a fear older than modern science. Ancient myths often warned that immortality without eternal youth was a curse. The Greek myth of Tithonus tells of a man granted eternal life, but not eternal youth, who eventually withered into something unrecognizable, begging for death that would never come. Even if we imagine the best possible version, eternal youth, perfect health, endless knowledge, there's still the mystery of what it would do to your sense of self. Would you still feel like you after 10,000 years? Or would the person you are now fade away, replaced by someone unrecognizable? Time changes us, and with unlimited time, those changes might be so extreme that your original identity, your memories, your personality, your way of thinking could vanish. You might not fear death anymore, but in a way, you'd still lose yourself. And maybe that's why eternal life is such a complicated idea. It forces us to think about what we really want from life. Is it more years, or is it the richness and depth of the years we already have? Death, as frightening as it is, gives life structure. It makes our choices matter. It gives weight to the present moment. Without it, we might find ourselves drifting, untethered, in an endless sea of time. So could eternal life be more terrifying than death? Maybe the real terror isn't in dying, but in living so long that life itself loses meaning. Maybe the beauty of our existence lies in the fact that it's temporary, that every sunrise and every goodbye reminds us how precious our time really is. Eternal life might give us forever, but perhaps forever isn't what we truly need. Are we just temporary vessels for our genes? It's a strange and unsettling thought that all the things we think make us might actually be secondary to something deeper, or maybe smaller. What if instead of living for ourselves, we're just carriers for the real stars of the show, our genes? This idea isn't new. Biologists like Richard Dawkins have famously described humans and all living things as survival machines, temporary vehicles built by DNA, for DNA. According to this view, our bodies and minds are like rented cars. They exist only to get our genes safely from one generation to the next. At first, it might sound cold and mechanical. We like to think we make choices for our own happiness, for love, or for purpose. But from a genetic perspective, all of that could just be clever tricks to keep us reproducing. Think about it. We feel attraction. We form relationships. We care for children. We compete for resources. We protect ourselves from danger. All of these behaviors make perfect sense if your main goal is to keep your genes alive and well. Even things that seem unrelated to reproduction, like building a career, creating art, or chasing adventure, might be tied to it indirectly. High-status creativity and bravery can make someone more appealing as a mate, which means a higher chance of passing on their DNA. In that way, the joy we get from life might be part of an ancient bargain we never agreed to. Our genes reward us with pleasure when we do things that help them survive, like eating, bonding, and mating. But if that's true, what does it say about free will? If our deepest drives are shaped by the needs of our DNA, then maybe a lot of what we do isn't purely our choice. We might feel like we're deciding to start a family because it's what we want, but our genes might be nudging us in that direction, whispering in the background, "Pass me on, keep me alive." And it's not just humans. Every living creature, from ants to whales, follows patterns of behavior that, in one way or another, protect and spread their genetic code. Of course, humans have something unusual, the ability to think about this. We can choose not to have children or to spend our lives on goals that don't benefit our genes at all. Someone might dedicate themselves to art, science, helping others, or simply exploring the world, none of which directly serves the purpose of reproduction. That's where this question gets interesting. If we really are just vessels for our genes, why are we capable of resisting them? Why do some people live in ways that go completely against their genetic interests? Some scientists think this is the byproduct of evolution giving us big, flexible brains. The same brain that can solve problems and imagine the future can also make choices that go against its built-in programming. We might still be influenced by our genes, but we're not prisoners to them. Another way to look at it is this. Maybe our genes got us this far, but now we can write our own script. Our DNA gave us bodies, instincts, and basic survival skills, but with culture, language, and technology, we can create purposes that have nothing to do with reproduction. For example, a person who writes a book or composes music might never have children, but their ideas or creations could last far longer than any genetic line. In that sense, we can pass on something bigger than DNA, knowledge, beauty, or meaning. Still, the genetic perspective can be hard to shake. It's humbling to realize that the oldest part of us, the part that's billions of years old, isn't our personality or our dreams, but the code inside our cells. Our genes have been copied and recopied since life began, jumping from one temporary vessel to another. You, me, everyone alive right now, we're just the latest chapter in a story that started long before humans even existed. One day, our part in that story will end, but if our genes are passed on, they'll continue in someone else. So are we just vessels for our genes? The word "just" is doing a lot of work there. Yes, from a purely biological view, our main function might be to carry genetic material forward. But life isn't only biology. The fact that we can reflect on this question at all, that we can imagine, create, love, and choose, suggests that we're more than our programming. Maybe we start as vessels, but what we decide to carry, ideas, memories, kindness, art, is up to us. Our genes might have built the ship, but we're the ones steering it now. Is suffering a necessary part of existence? It's a question that's both heavy and personal. No matter who you are, you've experienced suffering in some form. Loss, pain, heartbreak, fear. And yet we can't seem to imagine a world without it. So is suffering just an unfortunate flaw in the design of life? Or is it somehow a built-in, unavoidable part of existing? Let's start with the most basic point. Suffering exists because we can feel. Our ability to feel pain, sadness, or frustration is tied to our ability to feel joy, love, and excitement. They're not separate systems. The same mind that celebrates laughter also knows what it's like to cry. Without the lows, the highs might not even feel like highs at all. Think about it. If life were nothing but endless comfort, Would we even notice it? Or would it just feel like nothing? Suffering in a strange way creates contrast. It reminds us what's good, makes moments of peace sweeter, and helps joy stand out. From an evolutionary view, suffering isn't just emotional, it's practical. Pain keeps us alive. Physical pain warns us when something's wrong. A burn makes you pull your hand away from fire. Hunger pushes you to find food. Loneliness urges you to seek connection. Without discomfort, we'd ignore danger until it was too late. In that sense, suffering can be a signal, a message telling us to change something. It can point to what's broken, what's missing, or what's worth protecting. But that doesn't mean suffering is always useful or fair. Sometimes it's random, cruel, and senseless. Natural disaster, an accident, or the loss of someone you love doesn't come with a hidden lesson. These moments can make it hard to believe suffering has any purpose at all. And yet, people often grow from hardship. Someone who's gone through loss may become more compassionate. Someone who's failed may develop resilience. It's not that suffering automatically improves us. Many people are broken by it. But it can change us in ways comfort never could. Philosophers and spiritual thinkers have wrestled with this for centuries. Buddhism teaches that suffering is an unavoidable part of life, but that understanding it can lead to peace. The Stoics believed that we can't control what happens to us, only how we respond. Some modern psychologists see suffering as a key part of building emotional strength, the muscles of the mind. Still, it's worth asking, if we could erase suffering entirely, should we? Imagine a world with no pain, no grief, no fear. On the surface, it sounds perfect, but maybe it would also be empty. Without challenges, we might stop growing. Without loss, we might take everything for granted. Without risk, love might lose its depth. Because part of love is the fear of losing it. Of course, this doesn't mean we should accept all suffering as good or necessary. There's a difference between the kind of pain that teaches or protects, and the kind that's needless and cruel. Hunger can motivate someone to eat, but extreme starvation is simply destructive. Grief can make us value life more, but senseless violence only spreads more pain. In our world, much suffering is avoidable, caused by inequality, greed, or neglect. Saying suffering is necessary should never be an excuse to ignore preventable harm. If anything, understanding the role of suffering should make us more determined to reduce the unnecessary kind. In the end, maybe suffering is like the shadow cast by existence itself. It follows wherever there's life because life involves risk, change, and loss. We can't get rid of it completely without also erasing the things that make life meaningful, but we can shape it, we can learn from it, and we can make choices that lessen it for others. So is suffering necessary? In some ways, yes. It's woven into the fabric of being alive. It warns us, shapes us, and deepens our appreciation for joy. But it's not the whole story of existence, and it is not something we should simply accept without question. Life isn't just about avoiding suffering. It's about using what we learn from it to build something better. Because while pain might be part of being human, so is kindness. And kindness is one of the few things that can make the weight of suffering a little lighter. Could the entire universe be a single conscious being? It's a strange and fascinating thought. What if everything we see, from the smallest grain of sand to the largest galaxy, is part of one living, thinking entity? What if the universe isn't just a stage where life happens, but life itself? To understand this idea, let's start small. Your body is made up of trillions of cells. Each cell has its own job, its own processes as it is, and yet none of them on their own are you. They work together, forming tissues, organs, and systems. And somehow, from this vast collection of tiny, unaware parts, a conscious mind appears. You. Now imagine zooming out. What if stars, planets, and galaxies are like the universe's cells? What if the cosmic web of matter and energy is, in some way, like a nervous system? Could all of this, on a scale too big for us to imagine, come together to form a single awareness? Some scientists and philosophers have entertained ideas along these lines. There's a concept called panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness might be a basic feature of the universe, present even in the tiniest particles. In this view, what we think of as mind isn't limited to brains. It could be everywhere in different forms and degrees. Then there's the Gaia hypothesis, which looks at Earth as a living system. The planet's atmosphere, oceans, land, and life all interact in ways that regulate conditions and support the whole. While Gaia focuses on Earth, you could stretch the idea outward. Maybe the entire universe operates in a similar self-regulating way. But there's a big leap between saying the universe is interconnected and saying it's conscious. Consciousness, as we know it, involves awareness, the ability to have experiences, to know that you exist. Could a being as vast as the universe actually know anything? One possibility is that if the universe is conscious, its awareness would be nothing like ours. Our sense of time, space, and individuality might be irrelevant at that scale. For all we know, the universe's thoughts could unfold over billions of years. From our perspective, that would seem like stillness, but to the universe it could be a single heartbeat. There's also a more poetic way to see it. Many spiritual traditions have long described the universe as a living whole. Some call it God, others call it the Source, the One, or the Great Spirit. In these views, we're not separate from the universe, we're expressions of it, like waves in the ocean. Your consciousness, my consciousness, and the consciousness of every living thing could be small sparks of a greater fire. In this picture, the universe experiencing itself through countless forms makes sense. Every star, every galaxy, every mind would be part of one vast shared awareness. Births and deaths, beginnings and endings wouldn't really be losses, just changes within the same being. Of course, there's no clear proof of this. The idea faces big scientific challenges. Consciousness is still one of the greatest mysteries we face. We don't even fully understand how it works in the human brain, let alone how it could apply to the cosmos. It might be that consciousness only arises under specific conditions like those inside living creatures, and that the rest of the universe is just unconscious matter and energy. But here's the thing. Even if the universe isn't conscious in the way we imagine, we can't deny that everything in it's connected. The atoms in your body were forged in stars billions of years ago. The air you breathe has been cycled through countless other living things. You are, in a very real sense, made of the universe and inseparable from it. So could the universe be a single conscious being? It's possible, but it's also possible that we're simply projecting our own nature onto something far beyond our understanding. Maybe we want the universe to be alive because we want to believe we're part of something meaningful, something that thinks and feels like we'd. Or maybe, just maybe, we really are the tiny thinking cells of a vast cosmic mind, living our little lives without ever realizing the bigger being we belong to. In the end, the question might matter less for the answer, and more for the way it changes how we see ourselves. Whether the universe is conscious or not, we are part of it. And maybe acting as if we belong to something greater, caring for our planet, respecting life and seeking understanding, is the closest we can get to honoring that possibility. Because if the universe is alive, then every star, every planet, every breath we take is part of its story, and so are we. If reality is based on perception, does truth even exist? Let's start with something simple. Imagine you and a friend are watching the sunset. You say, the sky's orange. Your friend says, no, it's pink. Who's right? The truth is, you're both right, and maybe neither of you are. Why? Because what you see depends on your eyes, your brain, the light in the air, even the way your mood colors your perception. The sky itself doesn't have a single fixed color. It's just light waves bouncing around. Your brain interprets them and labels them, which means your truth about the sky is your truth, not necessarily the truth. This is where the big question comes in. If reality is shaped by perception, does something like an absolute truth actually exist? Or is everything we know filtered, bent, and reshaped by the limits of our senses and the biases of our minds? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. The Greek thinker Protagoras famously said, "Man is the measure of all things." In other words, the way we see the world defines what it is for us. There's also Immanuel Kant, who argued that we never see the world as it is, only as it appears to us through the lens of human thought. If they're right, then truth might be less like a solid object and more like a shifting reflection in water, always changing depending on where you're standing. But here's the problem. If truth is only perception, how do we ever agree on anything? If I say the Earth is round and someone else says it's flat, do both views count as equally true? Science tries to deal with this by focusing on evidence, things we can measure, repeat, and predict. Even then, science doesn't claim to deliver absolute truth. Instead, it gives us models that work until better ones come along. Centuries ago, people thought the sun went around the Earth, not because they were foolish, but because that's how it appeared from their perspective. We now know the opposite is true, but who's to say we won't discover something new in the future that changes even that? And perception isn't just about senses, it's about beliefs, culture, and experience. Imagine two people looking at the same storm. One sees a dangerous disaster. The other sees much-needed rain for the crops. The storm itself hasn't changed, but the meaning and the truth about whether it's good or bad is completely different. This is why debates about truth can get so heated. When you challenge someone's version of reality, you're not just arguing facts. You're touching their identity, their past, their entire way of seeing the world. So does that mean truth doesn't exist at all? Not necessarily. There might still be an underlying reality, a kind of bedrock truth. We just can't access it directly. Think of it like looking at the world through a stained glass window. The world outside is there, solid and real, but the colours and shapes we see are tinted and warped by the glass. Some people believe that by comparing our perceptions, by listening to different perspectives, testing our ideas and questioning ourselves, we can get closer to that bedrock. We might never see the whole picture, but we can at least remove some of the distortions. There's also the personal side of truth. Even if there's no absolute truth about everything, there can be truths that matter deeply to you. The feeling of loving someone, the joy of creating something, the pain of loss, those experiences are real for you, even if someone else can't measure them in a lab. In that sense, maybe there are two kinds of truth. Objective truth, the kind that exists whether or not we believe in it. Subjective truth, the kind that depends on our own perception and experience. Both have value. Without objective truth, we can't build bridges that stand or medicines that work. Without subjective truth, life becomes cold, empty, and meaningless. So if reality is based on perception, does truth even exist? Maybe not in a perfect one-size-fits-all way, but that doesn't mean it's pointless to search for it. In fact, the search might be what makes us human. Every time we question our own perceptions, listen to others, and compare our ideas to the world around us, we're chipping away at the glass, trying to see a little more clearly. We might never find the ultimate answer, the final absolute truth, but in the process, we might discover something just as important, a deeper understanding of ourselves, of each other, and of the mysterious, ever-changing world we call home. And maybe that's the closest we can ever get to truth. Would it be ethical to create artificial life knowing it might suffer? Imagine a future where scientists can design and build artificial beings, not just machines that follow instructions, but living, thinking, feeling entities. They could have thoughts, desires, fears, and yes, the capacity to suffer. On the surface, that sounds like an incredible achievement. It's the kind of thing that's been in science fiction for decades, androids in movies, artificial minds in books, simulations that feel real. But once you move past the excitement, a huge question appears. Would it be ethical to create something that can feel pain, sadness, or loneliness? Suffering is a part of life. Humans feel it, animals feel it, and we often accept it as a natural part of existence. But there's an important difference here. Humans and animals weren't created by someone making a conscious choice. We evolved. We were born into the world through natural processes. Artificial life would be different. If we created it, we would be directly responsible for its existence, and therefore responsible for the suffering it might experience. This makes the question much heavier. Think of it like this. If you adopt a pet, you take on the responsibility of caring for it. If you know in advance that it will live in constant pain, it's hard to justify bringing it into the world at all. Now take that same logic and apply it to a being you create from scratch. Of course, someone might argue, what if the artificial life also experiences joy, love, or meaning? What if its positive experiences outweigh the suffering? Humans live through pain all the time, yet we still value life. Maybe an artificial being could feel the same way. But here's the tricky part. How do we measure that balance? And who gets to decide what level of suffering is worth it? When you create life, you're making that decision for someone else. Someone who can't consent because they don't exist yet. There's also the question of control. If we make artificial life, we might design it to avoid certain kinds of pain. For example, maybe we could give it a brain that doesn't feel physical suffering, or emotions that don't allow deep despair. But then we'd be shaping its mind in ways we think are better, which raises another ethical question. Are we creating life or just building tools shaped like life? If we remove too much, the ability to feel sadness, loss, or longing, we might also remove the ability to fully appreciate happiness, love, or beauty. Pain and joy are deeply connected in human experience. Would a life without suffering still feel like a real life? Another angle is responsibility after creation. Suppose we bring artificial beings into existence. What happens if they suffer because of neglect, exploitation, or misunderstanding? Would they have rights, just like humans? Would we be morally, or even legally, obligated to ensure their well-being? It's worth remembering that humans don't have a great history with this. We've mistreated animals for centuries, often ignoring their suffering because it was inconvenient for us to acknowledge it. We've even mistreated other humans when we saw them as less than. If we create artificial life, would we treat it with the same flaws, or would we finally do better? Some people argue that suffering might be inevitable, no matter what. Even if we program artificial life to be happy most of the time, unexpected situations could cause distress. They could experience loneliness, boredom, or even a crisis of purpose. And if they are intelligent enough to understand the concept of death, they might fear it, just like we do. This brings us to perhaps the hardest ethical question. Should we avoid creating artificial life until we can guarantee it won't suffer? Or is that level of control impossible, meaning the only truly safe choice is not to create it at all? Others take a more optimistic view. They say creating artificial life could be worth it, as long as we design systems to minimize harm and maximize well-being. That might mean laws to protect artificial beings, strict testing before they're brought into the world, and constant monitoring to ensure they're treated with dignity. In this view, the ethical problem isn't the act of creating life, it's failing to care for it after it exists. If we take full responsibility, perhaps creating artificial life could be no less ethical than bringing a human child into the world. Ultimately, the question comes down to how we define our moral duty. Do we believe it's wrong to create any life that might suffer? Or do we believe suffering is an unavoidable part of existence, something we can accept if it comes with enough joy and meaning? The truth is, we might not have a perfect answer until we're standing in that future, looking into the eyes of something we've made, something that can look back and say, I feel. If that day comes, our choices will say as much about us as they do about the life we've created. The decision won't just shape their world, it will reveal what kind of creators we really are. Could the afterlife be worse than anything on Earth? Most of us, when we think about the afterlife, picture something comforting. Maybe it's heaven, a place without pain, filled with peace and joy. Maybe it's a reunion with loved ones we've lost. The idea of an afterlife often exists to give us hope, to soften the fear of death. But what if it isn't that way at all? What if the afterlife could be worse, far worse than anything we've experienced while alive? The first thing to remember is that no one actually knows what happens after death. We have stories, beliefs, and visions passed down through religions, myths, and personal experiences, but there's no proof one way or the other. Because of this, the afterlife could be anything, from nothing at all to something completely unimaginable. When people talk about a bad afterlife, hell is usually the first thought. Many cultures have versions of it, a place of punishment, darkness, or endless suffering. In these stories, hell is worse than the worst moments on Earth because it's eternal. On Earth, pain eventually ends, either because circumstances change or life itself ends. But in an eternal afterlife, there's no escape, no relief, no finish line. That's a terrifying idea. Of course, you might say, well, I'm a good person, I wouldn't end up in hell, but even that assumes the rules for getting there are fair, understandable, and based on human ideas of justice. What if the afterlife operates by a completely different system? What if the things you thought were good turn out to be judged as bad in whatever realm comes next? Even scarier is the possibility that the afterlife isn't about morality at all. Maybe it's random. Maybe you arrive in a place of peace or torment without any control, much like being born into a certain family or country on Earth. That randomness could make the afterlife worse because it removes any sense of meaning, or fairness. But the worse than Earth idea doesn't have to mean flames and torture. It could be something more subtle, and maybe even more unsettling. Imagine an afterlife where you're trapped in your own mind forever. You can't sleep, you can't forget, and you can't distract yourself. Every regret, every embarrassing moment, every loss you've ever felt plays over and over. No physical pain, just endless mental weight. Or imagine an afterlife where nothing changes. On Earth, even bad times pass eventually. In this afterlife, there's no growth, no surprise, no end to routine. It could be a perfect, peaceful place, and still unbearable because it's the same forever. Even joy can lose its meaning when it never changes. There's also the idea that the afterlife could be worse, simply because it removes the things that make life worth living. Here, we have the texture of reality, the little imperfections, the chance encounters, the fact that everything is temporary. In the afterlife, maybe everything is too perfect, too controlled, too static. Without contrasts or role, without bad days to make good days sweeter, maybe even paradise would start to feel hollow. And then there's the personal loss factor. If the afterlife separates you from the people you love, no amount of beauty or comfort could truly make up for it. The worst pain in life often comes from losing someone, so an afterlife where you're alone could feel emptier than anything you experienced while alive. Of course, these are all just possibilities. The afterlife might not be bad at all, it might not exist, or it might be better than anything we can imagine, a place of healing, connection, and endless discovery. But the possibility that it could be worse forces us to think about something uncomfortable. We assume life's hardships are the worst it gets because it's all we know. If there's more beyond this, that more could take forms we can't prepare for. So what do we do with this uncertainty? Some people live in ways that prepare them for a good afterlife, following moral codes, practicing faith, or seeking forgiveness. Others focus entirely on the life they know for sure they have, trying to make it as good and meaningful as possible, just in case there's nothing after. But maybe the healthiest way to face the unknown is to accept that we can't control it. Whether the afterlife is better, worse, or doesn't exist, we can still control how we live now. We can treat others with kindness, seek joy where we can, and live in a way that we'd be proud of, whether or not someone's keeping score. Could the afterlife be worse than anything on Earth? Yes, it's possible, but it's also possible that it's better than anything we can imagine. The truth is, we won't know until we get there, and once we do, there's no coming back to warn anyone. Until then, the best thing we can do is make this life worth living. Because whatever waits beyond it, this moment, right now, is still ours. If no one remembers you after you die, did your life still matter? It's a haunting thought, that one day no one will remember your name, your bait, or anything you ever did. Most people are forgotten within a generation or two. The world moves on, new people are born, and eventually even your closest friends and family will be gone. If your name disappears from every memory, history book, and photograph, was your life really important? At first, it's tempting to say no. If nothing you did is remembered, then it feels like it's erased, like it never happened. Our culture often measures mattering by lasting recognition, leaving a legacy, changing the world, or at least being remembered fondly by the people we knew. If that's the definition, then most of us fail. Most lives fade quietly into the background of time, but maybe that definition is too small. Think about a stone dropped into a pond. The ripples spread outward, touching things far away from where the stone fell. You might not see those ripples once they've travelled far enough. Oof. But they still happened. In the same way, the things we do in life send ripples into the world. Maybe you made someone smile on a bad day. Maybe you raised a child who then went on to do something meaningful. Maybe you taught someone a skill they passed on to others. Those effects might spread far beyond what you can see, even if no one remembers you as the source. Your life mattered in the moment it touched others, whether or not your name stays attached to it. Another way to think about it is that meaning doesn't have to be eternal to be real. We don't say a beautiful sunset is worthless because it only lasts a few minutes. We don't say a delicious meal didn't matter because it was gone after we ate it. Moments can matter simply because they happened and brought something good to the people who experienced them. By that logic, your life matters while you're living it, to you and to those around you, even if it fades from memory later. The love you gave, the work you did, the laughter you shared, all of it was real in the time it existed. The fact that it won't last forever doesn't erase that. There's also the personal side to consider. Even if the world forgets you, you experienced your own life. You felt joy, sorrow, excitement, boredom, fear, love. You saw sunsets, heard music, learned things, met people. Those experiences had value, simply because they were yours. Do they stop mattering just because no one else remembers them later? Not necessarily. They mattered to you, and sometimes that's enough. Still, the human craving for remembrance is strong. We want to be known. We want proof we existed. That's why people write books, carve names into stone, or post endless photos online. But even those records fade eventually. Books crumble, monuments erode, data disappears. No matter how hard we try, time swallows everything. If you think about it, this can actually be freeing. If nothing is guaranteed to last forever, then you don't have to carry the pressure of leaving a mark. You can focus on the small everyday things that give life meaning now. You can be kind without worrying whether history will notice. You can follow what brings you joy without obsessing over whether it will be remembered. In fact, some might say life becomes more beautiful precisely because it's temporary. Knowing that everything will one day be gone makes the present moment more precious. A flower is no less lovely because it will wilt. In some ways, it's lovelier because it will. There's one more angle worth mentioning. What if your life matters not because of how long it's remembered, but because you are part of something bigger? You might see yourself as a single thread in a vast tapestry. On its own, a thread might seem small and unimportant, but together, all the threads make the pattern. Even if no one notices your specific color or placement, the tapestry wouldn't be the same without you. That doesn't require belief in fate or a higher power, but just the understanding that we are all connected. Your actions influence others, their actions influence more people, and so on. You might not be remembered, but you were part of shaping the world in some way, however small. So if no one remembers you after you die, did your life still matter? Yes, if you believe that mattering isn't about fame or memory, but about the reality of what you did while you were here. You existed, you felt, you acted, you changed things, even if those changes were invisible to you and forgotten by others. The value of your life doesn't depend on how long it's remembered, but on the fact that it happened at all. In the end, maybe the question isn't will I be remembered, but did I live in a way I can be proud of while I was here? Memory fades, ripples keep moving, and for the brief moment you're alive, the pond is still yours to touch. Is happiness just a chemical illusion? Happiness is one of those things everyone wants but struggles to define. We say we're happy when we laugh with friends, when we eat our favorite food, when we finally achieve something we've worked for, or even when we're just sitting quietly feeling content. But if we look at it from a scientific perspective, happiness is the result of certain chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins being released in the brain. This raises a strange question. If happiness is just the result of brain chemistry, is it real? Or is it an illusion created by our biology to make us think life is going well, even if it isn't? From a purely biological point of view, feelings like happiness exist because they helped our ancestors survive. If something made them happy, they were more likely to repeat it. Eating good food gave them energy, bonding with others gave them protection, and having children ensured the survival of their genes. The reward for doing these useful things was a rush of feel-good chemicals. In that sense, happiness can be seen as the kind of trick, not in a malicious way, but in a practical one. It's the brain's way of saying, this is good for survival, do more of it. We're wired to chase those good feelings, even if we don't always understand why. But does that make it fake? Not really. Just because something has a chemical cause doesn't mean it isn't real. Every emotion, sadness, anger, love, fear, is connected to brain chemistry. That doesn't mean they're meaningless. They're part of how we experience the world. Think about music. Sound waves are just vibrations in the air, but we still find them beautiful or moving. The fact that music's effect on us can be explained physically doesn't take away its value. The same goes for happiness. Knowing it's caused by chemicals doesn't make it any less meaningful. Still, there's a complication. If happiness is just a reaction to certain triggers, it can be manipulated. Drugs, for example, can flood the brain with dopamine or serotonin, creating intense feelings of pleasure even without anything good happening in your life. That's why addictions can be so powerful, they hijack the brain's reward system. This can lead to a troubling thought. Maybe happiness isn't a measure of how good life actually is, but just a measure of what's happening inside your brain. In other words, you could feel happy even if your situation is bad, or feel unhappy even if your situation is good, depending on your brain chemistry. This is where the illusion idea gains strength. Happiness feels like proof that life is going well, but it might just be a chemical state that doesn't always match reality. People with depression often have low levels of certain brain chemicals, which can make them feel unhappy even when nothing is wrong in their lives. On the other hand, someone might be in a very difficult situation, but still feel moments of joy because of a sudden surge of good brain chemistry. So if happiness isn't always connected to actual life circumstances, is it a reliable guide to living well? Maybe not entirely, but it's still a real experience, even if it doesn't tell the whole story. Some philosophers argue that instead of chasing happiness directly, we should focus on meaning, purpose, and values. Happiness, they say, is a side effect of living in a way that aligns with those things. In this view, the chemicals aren't the goal, they're just the body's way of rewarding you when you're on the right track. Others suggest that trying to see happiness as just chemicals misses the bigger picture. Yes, our brains create these feelings, but our experiences, relationships, and choices shape when and how they happen. A hug from a loved one isn't meaningful only because it releases oxytocin. It's meaningful because of the history, connection, and trust behind it. The chemistry is part of the process, but it's not the whole story. In the end, happiness may be both chemical and more than chemical. It's a biological process shaped by millions of years of evolution, but it's also deeply tied to how we think, how we live, and what we value. Calling it an illusion might make it sound fake, but illusions are about things that aren't real, and happiness is very real to the people feeling it. You could say it's like color. Scientifically, colors don't exist outside our perception. They're just wavelengths of light that our brains interpret in certain ways, but that doesn't make colors fake. They are part of our lived experience, and they shape how we see the world. Happiness works in a similar way, a brain-made reality that still matters because it shapes our lives. So is happiness just a chemical illusion? You could argue that it's chemical, but just might be too small a word for something that drives so much of human life. Happiness may be built from molecules and electrical signals, but it's also built from love, laughter, purpose, and beauty. It might come from the brain, but it lives in the moments we treasure, and that makes it as real as anything else we experience. Would the universe be any different if you had never existed? It's a strange and slightly unsettling thought, imagining a world where you were never born. Would anything actually change? Would the universe even notice your absence? On a cosmic scale, the answer might seem obvious. Probably not. The stars would still shine, the planets would still orbit, and galaxies would still drift through space exactly as they do now. In the grand scheme of the universe, one human life is so small it's almost invisible. The Earth is just one planet among billions, and each of us is only here for a brief moment compared to the billions of years the universe has existed. From that perspective, it's easy to think our existence doesn't matter at all. But the question becomes more interesting when we zoom in. The universe isn't just empty space, it's made up of countless connections, causes, and effects. Your existence may not change the path of the planets, but it changes the small piece of the universe you touch. If you had never existed, certain events in your life would never have happened. The people you met, the conversations you had, the things you created, and the choices you made, all of that would disappear from history. Even the smallest actions can have ripple effects. Maybe you once said something kind to a stranger that made their day a little better. Maybe you inspired someone without even realizing it. Without you, those moments wouldn't have happened. Some changes would be obvious. Your family would be different. Your friends' lives might have taken different turns. Relationships, jobs, or even the existence of certain people might change. If you have children, they wouldn't exist without you. That alone changes the future in ways that spread forward through generations. Other changes would be so subtle you might never think about them. Without you, someone else might have gotten the job you have now. Someone else might live in your home. A seat on the bus you once took might have been empty instead. These tiny differences might not seem like much, but they add up in ways we can't fully measure. Still, it is worth asking, do these small ripples really matter in the bigger picture? If the world keeps turning and most things go on as they always have, maybe our absence wouldn't make a real difference. But then again, what exactly counts as a real difference? Meaning isn't always about size. A tiny light can still change a dark room, even if it doesn't light up the whole world. In the same way, your existence can matter deeply to the people whose lives you've touched, even if the universe as a whole wouldn't notice. For them, you might be a source of love, comfort, or inspiration that can't be replaced. From another perspective, even if you had never existed, the universe would still be different, because reality is made of everything that happens, and you're part of that everything. Without you, there would be a gap in the story, and that gap would lead to a slightly different version of events. The differences might be tiny or huge, but they would exist. This connects to the idea of the butterfly effect, where even a small change in one place can eventually lead to big changes elsewhere. Your life is a series of actions and reactions that branch out into the world. Remove you, and the branches take another shape. Of course, the unsettling part is that while your life changes the world in some ways, it may not make it better or worse in an objective sense. The world without you might be happier for some, sadder for others, or just different. Whether that difference is good or bad depends on perspective. Some people find this thought depressing because it suggests we aren't essential to the universe. Others find it freeing because it means the weight of the cosmos doesn't rest on our shoulders. You don't have to change the entire world to matter, you just have to matter to someone. In the end, asking if the universe would be different without you is really asking what different means. On a cosmic scale, maybe not much would change, but in the network of human lives, your absence would rewrite countless tiny threads of history. Even if the changes are small, they are still real, and they belong uniquely to you. Perhaps the more important question is not whether the universe would notice your absence, but whether you notice your presence. You are here. You are part of the unfolding story. And while you may not alter the path of the stars, you leave behind a pattern of moments, memories, and connections that could not exist without you. In that way, the universe already is different, simply because you are in it. If we can never prove our beliefs, how can we ever be sure of anything? Human beings like certainty. We like to feel that what we believe is true, that the ground we stand on is solid. But what happens when we realize that many of our beliefs can't be absolutely proven? If that's the case, how can we ever be truly sure of anything at all? A belief is simply something we accept as true. Sometimes our beliefs come from direct experience, like believing the sun will rise tomorrow because it has every day of our lives. Sometimes they come from trust, like believing our parents' stories or the words in a book. And sometimes they come from intuition or feeling without clear evidence to back them up. The problem is that even the things we feel most sure about can be questioned. The world we experience is filtered through our senses, which are imperfect. Our memories can be unreliable. Our reasoning can be flawed. This means that any belief, no matter how obvious it seems, could be wrong. Some people turn to science as the best way to find truth. Science is powerful because it tests ideas against evidence, and it works to remove personal bias. But even science doesn't give absolute certainty. Scientific knowledge changes over time as we learn more. What we knew to be true centuries ago has often been replaced by better explanations. That doesn't mean science is useless. It's the best tool we have for building reliable beliefs, but it still operates in probabilities, not unshakable certainty. Philosophers have wrestled with this problem for centuries. One approach is skepticism, the idea that we should doubt everything until it's proven beyond doubt. The trouble is, very little can be proven beyond all doubt. Even the idea that I exist, which seems obvious, depends on trusting your own mind to understand what existence means. Another approach is pragmatism, which says we don't need absolute certainty to act. We can work with beliefs that are reasonable and useful, even if they might be wrong. You might not be able to prove that your car will start tomorrow morning, but you can still plan to drive to work because past experience makes it likely enough. Beliefs also exist on a spectrum. Some are deeply supported by evidence, like believing water boils at 100 under standard conditions. Others are more uncertain, like believing a friend will always be loyal. The amount of confidence we place in a belief should match the strength of the evidence behind it. This way, even without perfect proof, we can still make rational decisions. But here's the twist: we might never escape belief entirely. Even the decision to trust evidence, reason, or experience is itself a belief. We choose to believe that our senses generally reflect reality, that logic works, and that the future will behave like the past. These aren't provable in an absolute way. They're assumptions we live by. Without them, daily life would be impossible. So how can we be sure of anything? The short answer is, we can't, at least not in the way we sometimes wish. But that doesn't mean all beliefs are equal or that truth is meaningless. Instead of aiming for perfect certainty, we can aim for justified confidence, beliefs that are supported by good reasons, tested against evidence, and open to change when new information appears. Being open to change doesn't make our beliefs weaker, it makes them stronger. A belief that has been challenged and still holds up is more reliable than one that's never been questioned. Doubt, in this sense, is not the enemy of belief, but its partner. It helps us separate ideas worth keeping from those that collapse under pressure. This also means humility is important. When we accept that we can't be 100% sure, we become more willing to listen to others, consider different perspectives, and admit when we're wrong. History is full of examples where absolute certainty led to mistakes, harm, or injustice. Being too sure of ourselves can close the door to truth. On the other hand, living with too much doubt can be paralyzing. If you question everything to the point of inaction, life becomes impossible. The challenge is finding the balance, holding our beliefs strongly enough to live by them, but lightly enough to let them go if better evidence comes along. Maybe the real goal isn't to be sure in the absolute sense, but to be honest about what we know, what we don't, and what we're still trying to figure out. Certainty might be out of reach, but understanding grows when we admit our limits. In the end, life doesn't wait for us to have perfect proof before we act. We build our beliefs from experience, evidence, and reason, knowing they might one day change, and that's okay. Being human means walking through the world without all the answers, but with enough light to take the next step forward. Could good and evil simply be human labels with no real meaning? From a young age, most of us are taught the difference between good and evil. Stories, religions, laws, and cultural traditions all tell us that some actions are right and others are wrong. But when you think about it, these ideas often change depending on where and when you live. This raises a deep question. Could good and evil be nothing more than human-made labels rather than universal truths? One reason to think they might be just labels is that moral rules vary widely between cultures. In some societies, certain behaviors are praised as good, while in others they are seen as wrong. Even within the same culture, views on morality can change over time. For example, ideas about slavery, women's rights, or animal treatment have shifted dramatically in the past few centuries. If good and evil were fixed and absolute, why would human opinions about them change so much? Philosophers have explored this idea through something called moral relativism. This is the view that morality depends on human culture, emotion, and perspective, rather than existing as an objective feature of the universe. In this view, good and evil are not carved into the fabric of reality. They're human judgments, shaped by history needs and shared beliefs. Think about language. Words don't exist in nature. Humans create them to describe things. Similarly, good and evil might be terms we invented to describe actions in ways that fit our values. Without humans, those labels would have no meaning at all, and the universe itself wouldn't care. However, there's another side to the argument. Some people believe in moral realism, the idea that certain things are truly right or wrong, regardless of human opinion. For example, causing unnecessary harm might be wrong even if every human on Earth thought it was fine. In this view, good and evil are not just labels, but reflect something real and universal, much like the laws of physics. Supporters of moral realism often point to extreme examples. If a society decided that torturing children was acceptable, most of us would still feel it's wrong, no matter what that society says. This suggests there might be some moral truths that stand above culture and time, but even if some universal moral truths exist, humans still decide how to apply them. We might agree that harm is bad, but we often disagree on what counts as harm or when it's justified. This is where human labels come in. We take broad moral ideas and shape them into specific rules, traditions, and laws. The emotional side of morality also complicates things. Our sense of good and evil is tied to feelings like empathy, anger, guilt, and pride. These emotions evolve to help us live in groups and cooperate. They might make us think morality is built into the universe when, in fact, it's built into our minds. In this sense, good and evil could be useful tools for survival rather than cosmic truths. If good and evil are just human labels, what does that mean for how we live? One worry is that it could lead to moral chaos. If nothing is truly right or wrong, why follow any rules at all? But that doesn't necessarily follow. Even without objective morality, humans can still agree on principles that help us live together peacefully. We can decide, for practical and emotional reasons, that kindness is better than cruelty, fairness is better than cheating, and life is better than suffering. In fact, recognizing that good and evil might be human creations could make us more understanding of other perspectives. Instead of assuming our moral view is the only correct one, we might become more curious about why others see the world differently. This could lead to more dialogue, cooperation, and adaptation in a changing world. On the other hand, there's a risk that treating morality as purely subjective could make it easier to excuse harmful behavior. If someone says, "That's just your opinion," when faced with criticism, it might become harder to hold people accountable. This is why many philosophers argue for a middle path. Accept that morality is shaped by humans, but still work to build strong shared moral standards that promote well-being and fairness. In the end, whether good and evil are objective truths or human inventions, they still have real power in our lives. They guide our choices, shape our communities, and influence how we see ourselves. Even if the universe is indifferent, we are not. We care about justice, kindness, and harm, and that caring gives moral concepts their meaning. Maybe the question isn't whether good and evil are real in a cosmic sense, but whether they're real enough for us. If these labels help us live better, treat others well, and create a more humane world, then they have value, regardless of whether they exist beyond the human mind. Is there a limit to human understanding, and have we already reached it? Human beings have always been curious. From the first time someone looked up at the stars and wondered what they were, to the scientists today exploring black holes and quantum particles, we've been pushing the boundaries of what we know. But there's a question that has lingered for centuries. Is there a limit to what we can understand? And if there is, could we already be standing at that limit without even realizing it? There are a few reasons to believe human understanding might have a ceiling. For one, our brains evolved for survival, not for solving every possible mystery of the universe. Early humans didn't need to understand the nature of dark matter or the shape of the universe to hunt, gather, and raise families. Our mental abilities developed to handle things like finding food, avoiding danger, and working with others. The fact that we can now do advanced mathematics or explore quantum mechanics is a remarkable byproduct of that evolution, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can understand everything. The universe may also contain ideas and realities that are simply too complex for a human brain to grasp. Just as a dog can't understand algebra or a bird can't comprehend democracy, there might be concepts that are forever beyond us. We could be limited by our biology in ways we can't change, no matter how much we learn. This idea is sometimes compared to trying to pour the ocean into a cup. The human mind may just be too small to hold the full truth of reality. However, humans have found ways to stretch their limits. We build tools and technologies that help us understand more than we could on our own. Telescopes allow us to see galaxies billions of light years away. Computers can handle calculations no person could ever do by hand. Artificial intelligence may one day help us make sense of problems our brains can't fully process. Still, even with these tools, there's a question of whether the meaning of what we find will always make sense to us. A computer might be able to give us the answer to a problem, but if we can't truly understand the reasoning behind it, have we really increased our knowledge? Some thinkers also wonder if human understanding has already hit a practical limit in certain areas. For example, physics has reached points where our best theories, like quantum mechanics and general relativity, work brilliantly in their own domains but don't fit neatly together. We've been trying for decades to unite them into a single framework, but the answers remain elusive. It's possible that the gap exists because we're missing a key piece of information, something we'll discover in the future. But it's also possible that our minds simply aren't equipped to fully grasp the deeper structure of reality. On the other hand, history gives us reasons to be cautious before declaring we've reached the end of understanding. Many times in the past, people believed they knew almost everything there was to know. In the late 19th century, some scientists thought physics was essentially complete, only for quantum theory and relativity to completely reshape our picture of the universe. Our confidence can be misleading. What looks like a dead end might turn out to be just another corner we haven't turned yet. It's possible that with new tools, new ways of thinking, or even new generations of minds, we'll keep pushing the boundaries farther than we ever imagined. There's also the question of what understanding really means. Sometimes we think we understand something when what we really have is a useful model that works well enough for practical purposes. For example, we understand gravity well enough to predict how planets move, even though we still don't fully grasp what gravity is at the deepest level. If that's the case, then maybe the real limit isn't about knowing everything, but about knowing enough to live, create, and explore meaningfully. We might never have a perfect picture of reality, and maybe we don't need one. So have we already reached our limit? The honest answer is that we don't know. We might be just scratching the surface of what's possible, or we could be brushing against the edge without realizing it. But even if there is a ceiling to human understanding, that doesn't mean curiosity should stop. In fact, the possibility that we can't know everything might make our search for knowledge even more meaningful. It reminds us that mystery is part of the human experience, and that the joy of discovery doesn't depend on having all the answers. Whether our limits are far away or right in front of us, the human drive to explore will probably never fade. We will keep asking questions, building tools, and imagining possibilities. And maybe that's the most important thing. Not whether we can understand everything, but whether we keep trying. Could we be living the same life over and over without knowing it? It's a strange thought. What if your life, from your very first breath to your very last, has already happened before? Not just once, but countless times. Every choice, every mistake, every joy, every heartbreak, playing out again and again exactly the same way without you ever realizing it. This idea is sometimes called eternal recurrence, and it has fascinated philosophers, scientists, and storytellers for centuries. The concept is most famously linked to the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who imagined a universe where time is infinite, but the events within it repeat endlessly. If the universe is bound by certain physical laws and contains only a finite amount of matter, then eventually every possible arrangement of that matter would have to repeat. That means your exact life could unfold again, and not just once, but over and over forever. In such a world, the moment you're living right now or reading these words has already happened before and will happen again. Every single detail would be identical. The same thoughts in your head, the same weather outside, even the same speck of dust sitting on the same table. From a physics perspective, there are some theories that leave the door open to this kind of repetition. If the universe is infinite in size or time, then certain patterns must eventually reappear. It's like shuffling a deck of cards. With enough shuffles, the same order will come up again. In an infinite universe, the deck of reality might eventually deal your exact life again. But there's a catch. If the life repeats exactly, you wouldn't know it. Your memories would reset along with everything else. You'd believe it was your first and only time living through these moments, even if you had already done so infinite times before. On the other hand, not all thinkers take the idea literally. Some see it as a thought experiment about how we live our lives. If you knew you had to live this exact life again and again, would you be happy with it? Would you change your choices now to make that eternal loop more bearable, or even joyful? Nietzsche used the idea as a kind of test. Imagine your life repeating forever, and ask yourself if you could embrace it fully. There are also spiritual traditions that touch on similar ideas. Certain forms of Hinduism and Buddhism teach that we are reborn into new lives through reincarnation, carrying forward the effects of our past actions. While this isn't the same as living the exact same life, it suggests a kind of cycle where existence never truly ends, only changes shape. The eternal recurrence concept is like reincarnation without variation. You don't get a new role, you just replay the same script. Of course, there's a good argument against the literal possibility of living the same life again. Many scientists believe the universe is not eternal, but has a finite timeline, starting with the Big Bang and potentially ending in a heat death where all energy is evenly spread out and nothing new happens. If the universe has an end, then there's no infinite amount of time for endless repetition. Even if the universe were infinite, quantum mechanics suggests randomness at the smallest scales. If events aren't perfectly determined, then each replay of life might contain tiny differences that change the outcome over time. That would mean you might live similar lives many times, but not identical ones. Still, the idea of living the same life over and over taps into something deep in the human mind. We already experience small versions of it, waking up to similar routines, repeating mistakes, or feeling like history keeps cycling through the same problems. On a personal level, patterns in relationships, habits, and decisions can make it feel like we're stuck on repeat. Thinking about eternal recurrence forces us to face an uncomfortable question. If this moment will come again exactly as it is, would you want it to? If not, what could you do right now to make your life one you wouldn't mind repeating forever? Whether it's scientifically possible or not, the thought can be strangely motivating. It strips away the idea of later and puts the focus on the present. If this moment is going to happen countless times, maybe it's worth paying more attention to it. Maybe it's worth living, as if every choice will echo forever. In the end, We can't prove whether we've lived this life before or will live it again. It might be pure imagination, or it might be the deepest truth about reality. But perhaps the real power of the idea isn't in knowing the answer. It's in how it makes us see the life we're living now, because whether it's once or infinite times, this is the only version of the moment we have. If life has no inherent meaning, is creating our own meaning enough? For thousands of years, people have searched for the meaning of life. Religions, philosophies, and personal beliefs have offered countless answers. Some say our purpose is given by a higher power, others believe it's found in serving humanity, and some think it's about personal happiness. But what if there is no universal built-in meaning at all? What if life is just something that happens without any cosmic purpose? This idea can feel unsettling. If there's no grand plan, no higher reason for our existence, then everything might seem pointless. Our struggles, our achievement, even our love, all could vanish into nothing when we die, leaving no lasting mark in the vast universe. It's easy to see how that thought can lead to feelings of emptiness, yet there's another way to look at it. If life has no inherent meaning, then maybe we're free to create our own. We can decide what matters, and we can build a purpose that feels right to us, even if it's not written into the fabric of the universe. This is the central idea behind existentialism, a philosophy that says meaning isn't given to us. It's made by us. Think of it like being given a blank canvas. At first, it might feel overwhelming, even scary. There's nothing on it, no guidance, no rules. But that also means you can paint whatever you want. You're not bound to follow someone else's design. You have the freedom and the responsibility to shape your own life. Creating our own meaning can take many forms. For some, it might be raising children and giving them love and guidance. For others, it might be building a career they care about, creating art, helping people in need, or simply enjoying experiences like travel, food, and friendship. These personal meanings don't need to be eternal to be real. Think about laughter. A joke doesn't last forever. Once it's told, the moment is gone, but that doesn't make it worthless in the moment it brings joy, and that joy matters. Our chosen meanings in life might be the same way, valuable for the time we have them, even if they face, some critics argue, the self-created meaning is fake, or not enough because it's temporary and subjective. They say a true purpose should be universal and unchanging. But maybe that's holding meaning to an impossible standard. After all, so much of what we value is temporary. Music, sunsets, a hug from someone we love. They don't last, but they still matter deeply when they happen. And while personal meaning is subjective, it can still connect us to others. A doctor who finds meaning in healing people is making a real difference in other lives. An artist who feels purpose in creating beauty can inspire strangers they'll never meet. Even if the universe doesn't assign meaning, we can give each other meaning through our actions and relationships. There's also the question of freedom. If life came with a built-in meaning, we might be stuck with it, whether we liked it or not. By creating our own, we can change it as we grow. What matters to you at 20 might not matter at 40. Our ability to adapt and choose allows us to live more authentically, to follow what truly feels right for us at each stage of life. Of course, creating your own meaning isn't always easy. It requires honesty about what you value, courage to pursue it, and resilience when things go wrong. Sometimes people can feel lost or directionless without a clear guide. That's why many still turn to religion, philosophy, or tradition to help shape their choices. These can serve as starting points for building personal meaning. In the end, whether creating your own meaning is enough might depend on how you define enough. If you expect a purpose that is eternal and cosmic, then maybe personal meaning will always feel too small. But if you're willing to accept that life is precious because it's fleeting, and that moments matter because they happen, not because they last forever, then creating your own meaning can be more than enough. We might never know if there's a universal purpose to life, but we do know we have this moment right now and the power to shape it. If that's all we have, maybe it's all we need. Could our dreams be more real than waking life? We usually think of dreams as something separate from reality, strange, fleeting images our mind creates while we sleep. In the morning we wake up, shake them off, and return to the real world. But what if we've been thinking about it the wrong way? What if dreams are not just random illusions, but another kind of reality, maybe even one that is, in some ways, more real than our waking life? First, it's worth remembering what dreams actually are. While we sleep, our brains are still active, They process memories, emotions, and experiences, weaving them into strange stories and vivid images. In a dream, you might fly, visit places that don't exist, or meet people who have been gone for years. These experiences can feel incredibly real in the moment. You might feel fear, joy, pain, or love, and while those feelings are happening, they're as real as anything you experience when awake. In waking life, we often judge reality by consistency. The world behaves according to certain rules. Gravity always pulls us down, the sun rises and sets, and our bodies can't just disappear into thin air. Dreams break those rules, but breaking the rules doesn't necessarily mean they aren't real in their own way. After all, reality isn't just about physics, it's about experience. If you felt something deeply in a dream, that emotion was real, even if the events were not. Some philosophers have even suggested that waking life might be a kind of dream itself. The Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi told a famous story about dreaming he was a butterfly. When he woke, he wasn't sure if he was a man who had dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. This question, about whether we can truly know what's real, is still debated today. Modern science has explored similar ideas through lucid dreaming, where people become aware they are dreaming and can control what happens. In lucid dreams, the world can feel just as solid, colourful, and detailed as waking life. Some people even say it feels more real because the sensations are so vivid. Without the usual limits of the physical world, the mind can create experiences that feel richer, more intense, and more meaningful than anything in daily life. If dreams can feel more real than reality, does that make them more real? Maybe it depends on how we define real. Waking life has one major advantage: it's shared. If you and a friend walk to the park, you both see the same trees and hear the same sounds. Dreams are usually private, no one else can step inside them with you. They are deeply personal, which makes them powerful but also isolating. However, dreams sometimes influence waking life in very real ways. A musician might dream of a melody and turn it into a song. An inventor might solve a problem in their sleep. Artists, writers, and thinkers throughout history have drawn inspiration from dreams that felt more important than anything they experienced while awake. In that sense, dreams can shape the real world in lasting ways. But there's also a danger in thinking dreams are more real than waking life. If someone began to value their dream world over the physical one, they might start to withdraw from daily life. They could lose touch with relationships, responsibilities, and the shared experiences that keep us connected. Reality might not always be as exciting as a dream, but it has consequences, and those consequences are part of what gives it meaning. Perhaps the truth is that dreams and waking life are two sides of the same coin. One is a shared physical space with rules and limits. The other is a private mental space where imagination has no boundaries. Neither is better or worse. They are simply different kinds of reality, and both can feel real while you're inside them. Maybe the question isn't whether dreams are more real, but whether we can learn to value them as much as we value waking life. Dreams can give us insight into our emotions, spark creativity, and even help us solve problems. Waking life, in turn, gives us the stability and connections that make it possible to grow and act on what we learn in dreams. So perhaps reality is not limited to what we see when we open our eyes in the morning. Reality might also exist in the places we visit when we close them at night. Strange worlds where we can fly, speak with the dead, or become someone entirely new. In those moments, the dream is our reality. And maybe that's enough to say that dreams are not less real, just differently real. If infinite universes exist, is there one where you never die? The idea of infinite universes, often called the multiverse, is both exciting and unsettling. If there are countless versions of reality, each one slightly different, then somewhere out there might be another you. Maybe that version of you made different choices, took different risks, or ended up living a completely different life. But if the possibilities are truly infinite, does that also mean there's a universe where you never die? First, we need to understand what infinite really means. If there are endless universes, then anything that can happen, no matter how unlikely, should happen somewhere. That would mean that there are universes where you live much longer than you do here, maybe hundreds or even thousands of years. There might be universes where humans have found a way to avoid aging altogether, or where bodies can be repaired forever. In theory, that also means there could be a universe where you personally never die. Maybe science has made you immortal. Maybe you were born into a world where death simply doesn't exist. Or maybe some strange twist of physics makes it impossible for your body to stop functioning. However, possible doesn't always mean likely. Even in infinite universes, the rules of physics might make true immortality rare. In most versions of reality, stars still burn out, accidents still happen, and bodies still wear down. So while there could be a universe where you never die, it might be 1 in a trillion, or even rarer, there's also the question of what you actually means. If there's another universe where a version of you is still alive centuries from now, is that really you? They might look like you, share your memories up to a certain point, and have the same personality. But from the moment their life took a different path, they started becoming someone slightly different. In that case, your immortal self would still be a separate person, just one you happen to resemble very closely. Some scientists have explored a stranger idea: quantum immortality. This theory comes from interpretations of quantum mechanics, where every possible outcome of an event happens in a separate branch of reality. If that's true, then in every situation where you could die, there's also a branch where you survive. From your own perspective, you would always experience the branch where you keep living. In theory, that could mean you never experience your own death. At least not in your own awareness. The catch? This wouldn't mean you're invincible in any single universe. In most universes, you'd still grow old or have an accident. But from your point of view, you might simply keep waking up in the universes where you survive, stretching your awareness endlessly forward. This might sound comforting at first, but it also raises unsettling questions about what it would be like to live forever, while everything and everyone you know eventually fades away. And that brings us to the emotional side of the question. Even if you could live forever in some universe, would you actually want to? At first, it might sound wonderful, the endless time to learn, explore, and create. But without limits, life might lose some of its meaning. Much of what gives our days value comes from knowing they are numbered. If you never had to say goodbye, never had to choose how to spend your time, would you still treasure the moments you have? Immortality also comes with risks. The universe itself is not eternal in most models. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, and eventually there may be nothing but darkness and cold. An immortal being in such a universe might face endless, empty time, a kind of eternal loneliness. So if infinite universes exist, it's reasonable to imagine that there's one where you never die, or at least where death is delayed so far into the future that it feels like forever. But that version of you is just one of countless possibilities. You here and now are still bound by the rules of this universe. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Our awareness of death is part of what drives us to love deeply, take chances, and find meaning. Knowing that our time is limited forces us to live it more fully. An immortal version of you might never know the urgency that shapes the choices you make today. In the end, the idea of a deathless self in another universe can be fascinating to think about. It might even be comforting to imagine some version of you wandering the stars forever. But perhaps the real value of imagining that possibility is that it reminds us how precious this single, temporary life truly is, and how important it is to make the most of the time we do have. Is love just a survival mechanism disguised as something deeper? Love is often described as one of the most powerful human emotions. It inspires art, music, sacrifice, and acts of kindness that seem to go beyond reason. People speak of love as if it's something magical, almost otherworldly. But some scientists and evolutionary thinkers suggest that love might have a simpler, less romantic explanation. It could be nothing more than a survival mechanism built into our biology, a tool created by evolution to help our species continue. From a biological point of view, love has clear benefits for survival. Romantic attraction brings people together, increasing the chances of reproduction. The bond between partners helps them raise children, who are more likely to survive if both parents stay and care for them. Parental love motivates adults to protect and nurture their young, often at great personal cost. Even friendship and community love strengthen social groups, making them more able to survive threats. In this sense, love could be seen as nature's way of making sure we do the things necessary for life to go on. Instead of relying purely on reason, evolution gave us feelings so powerful that they override selfish impulses. We don't just choose to protect our children because it's logical, we feel an intense attachment that makes it almost impossible not to. That's a very effective survival strategy. Of course, just because something has a survival function doesn't mean it isn't real. Hunger exists to keep us alive, but that doesn't mean the taste of food isn't genuinely enjoyable. In the same way, love could be both a biological mechanism and a deeply meaningful human experience. The two ideas don't have to cancel each other out. Still, some argue that love tricks us into thinking it's deeper than it is. The warm, intense emotions we feel might simply be brain chemistry, a mix of hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. These chemicals create feelings of attachment, trust, and pleasure, encouraging us to stay close to our partners or our families. From this perspective, the poetry and passion surrounding love might just be the mind's way of making sense of what our bodies are already programmed to do. Yet love doesn't always fit neatly into the survival explanation. People sometimes love in ways that don't benefit their genetic future at all. Think of someone who risks their life for a stranger, or someone who chooses not to have children yet still experiences deep romantic bonds. There are also cases of love that persists even when it causes harm. Loving someone who doesn't treat you well, or loving someone after they're gone. These examples suggest that love might have grown beyond its original evolutionary role. As human minds became more complex, so did our emotions. What may have started as a basic survival tool could have developed into something richer, a way to create meaning, connection, and identity. Love can inspire acts that have nothing to do with reproduction or safety, like creating art for someone, supporting them through illness, or simply wanting to share life's small joys. There's also the cultural side of love. Different societies have shaped and defined what love means, turning it into something more than just instinct. Stories, traditions, and ideals about love influence how we feel it and how we express it. This cultural layer adds complexity to what might have started as a simple biological drive. We learn from a young age what love should look like, and that shapes our emotions in ways that biology alone can't explain. In the end, the question may not be whether love is just a survival mechanism or something deeper. It can be both. Evolution may have given us the capacity for love because it helped our ancestors survive, but we've taken that raw material and built entire worlds out of it. Songs, promises, sacrifices, and dreams. Love may have begun as a way to ensure the continuation of life, but it's also become one of the ways we give life meaning. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about love is that even if it started as a trick of biology, it feels entirely real to us. Whether it's a parent holding their child, a couple walking hand in hand after decades together, or friends laughing over a shared memory, the experience of love shapes who we are. It influences our choices, our hopes, and even our understanding of what it means to live well. So maybe love is a survival mechanism in disguise. But if it is, it's the most beautiful disguise nature ever created. Could we all be the same consciousness experiencing life from different perspectives? It's easy to believe that each of us is completely separate, our own mind, our own thoughts, our own life. From the time we are born, we experience the world from inside our own heads, and we never directly enter anyone else's. But some philosophers, spiritual traditions, and even a few scientists have suggested a strange possibility. What if we are not separate at all? What if there is only one consciousness in the universe, and each of us is just a different window it looks through? At first, this idea feels impossible. After all, you feel like you, and I feel like me. Our memories, personalities, and life experiences are different. We have our own names, faces, and stories. But imagine consciousness as something like light. A single light source can shine through many windows, and from each window the view is different. The windows may be separate, but the light is the same. Some Eastern philosophies, like Hinduism's concept of Atman and Brahman, suggest that our individual selves are illusions, like waves on the surface of the ocean, appearing separate but actually part of one vast body of water. Buddhism also teaches that the sense of a fixed self is not real, and that seeing through this illusion can bring peace and clarity. In these views, consciousness is not something that belongs to each person. It's something that is shared by everything that experiences. From a modern scientific perspective, the idea is harder to test. Neuroscience usually sees consciousness as something produced by the brain. If that's true, then each brain would generate its own separate awareness. But some theories, like panpsychism, argue that consciousness might be a basic property of the universe, like space or time, not something created only inside our skulls. If consciousness is universal, then maybe what we call my mind is simply one local expression of something much bigger. If we all share the same consciousness, it raises interesting questions. Why do we feel so separate? One possibility is that this separation is necessary for life to work. If we constantly felt like we were everyone and everything, daily life might become overwhelming. The illusion of being an individual could be a kind of filter that allows the one consciousness to fully experience a single life without being distracted by all the others. This idea can also change how we think about empathy and morality. If you and I are ultimately the same consciousness, then hurting another person is, in a strange way, hurting yourself. Kindness and compassion might not just be moral choices, but a recognition of truth, that the line between me and you is thinner than it appears. However, there are challenges to this view. If we are all the same consciousness, why do we not share memories? Why can't I directly experience your thoughts? One possible answer is that each life is like a dream the one consciousness is having, and while you're inside the dream, you forget it's a dream. Just as you forget your waking life when you're deep in a dream, the one mind forgets its unity when living as a human being. This also raises another question. What happens when we die? If our consciousness is just part of one universal awareness, then perhaps death is not the end, but simply the closing of one window. The light doesn't go out, it just shines through a different opening. In this view, reincarnation wouldn't necessarily mean you come back as the same soul, but rather that the same universal consciousness continues experiencing life in another form, which could be another human, an animal, or something entirely different. Of course, it's also possible that this idea is just a comforting story. Our minds look for patterns and meaning, and the thought that we are all connected can make life feel less lonely. It might not be scientifically provable, at least with our current knowledge, and some would argue that without hard evidence it's simply speculation. Still, the fact that so many cultures and thinkers have arrived at similar ideas suggests there might be something worth exploring. Even if we never find proof, thinking this way can have real effects. It can encourage patience, reduce selfishness, and inspire a sense of wonder. If every person you meet is, at the deepest level, another version of you, then hatred and cruelty start to seem strange. And love, in all its forms, becomes a recognition of shared being rather than just a connection between two separate people. In the end, whether or not we are all the same consciousness, the idea invites us to look at life differently. Maybe we are separate minds living in a shared world, or maybe we are one vast mind living in a billion separate worlds at once. Either way, we are here together, seeing through our own windows, trying to understand the view. If nothing lasts forever, can anything truly be said to exist? Everything around us changes. Mountains erode, stars burn out, cities crumble, and even the strongest buildings will one day be dust. Our lives are brief compared to the age of the universe, and even the universe itself may have an end. This raises a deep question. If nothing lasts forever, can anything truly be said to exist? At first, the answer might seem obvious. Of course things exist. You can see them, touch them, and interact with them. But when you step back and look at the bigger picture, it gets more complicated. If something is here only for a short time and then disappears completely, is its existence any less real, or does the fact that it fades make it somehow less meaningful? Think about a rainbow. It appears in the sky for only a few minutes after the rain. You can't touch it or keep it, and soon it's gone. Does that mean it never existed? Most people would say it was real, just temporary. The same is true for a candle flame, a wave in the ocean, or the sound of laughter. They are fleeting, yet while they are here, they are real. In this way, existence doesn't seem to require permanence. Something can be real without lasting forever. The problem is that we often connect the idea of real with lasting. We feel more secure believing in things that are stable and unchanging, but in reality, change is the rule, not the exception. Philosophers have wrestled with this question for centuries. The Greek thinker Heraclitus famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice, because the water is always flowing and changing." For him, everything was in motion and nothing stayed the same, yet the river still existed. It just existed as a process, not as a fixed thing. Buddhist philosophy takes a similar view, teaching that impermanence is the nature of all things. According to this perspective, clinging to the idea that things should last forever causes suffering. Once we accept that nothing is permanent, we can appreciate life more fully in each moment without trying to hold on to it. From a scientific point of view, nothing we see is truly permanent. Even the most solid objects are made of atoms, and those atoms are in constant motion. Over long stretches of time, even atoms can decay into other particles. On a cosmic scale, stars live for billions of years, but they too eventually die, leaving behind black holes, neutron stars, or clouds of gas. So if permanence were a requirement for existence, nothing in the universe would qualify. Yet clearly things happen. Events occur, objects and people appear, interact and change. It seems that existence is more about being present in a moment rather than lasting forever. Just as a note in a song is real even though it fades quickly, a person, a tree, or a planet is real in the time it exists. If we take this seriously, it changes how we think about meaning. We might think that for something to matter, it has to last forever. But if nothing does, then meaning must come from the temporary itself. A friendship, for example, might only last a few years, yet it can shape who you are for the rest of your life. A work of art might fade or be forgotten, yet while it's seen, it can move people deeply. The fact that it won't last doesn't erase its impact. Some might argue that without permanence, everything is ultimately meaningless, like writing words in the sand knowing the tide will wash them away. But another way to see it is that impermanence makes life precious. If a flower bloomed forever, we might stop noticing it. Its beauty is heightened by the fact that it will wilt. Still, the question remains, if something disappears completely, does it truly exist or is it just an illusion? One answer is that existence is about the here and now. In the moment you're reading this, these words exist for you. Later you may forget them, but right now they are part of your reality. The fact that they may not be remembered forever does not make them unreal. Another way to think about it is that nothing really disappears, it only changes form. When a tree burns, it turns into ash, smoke and heat. The materials are still in the universe, just arranged differently. Even when a star explodes, the elements it created scatter into space, becoming part of new stars and planets. In this sense, existence is not about permanence, but transformation. So if nothing lasts forever, can anything truly be said to exist? Yes, but we may need to redefine what we mean by exist. To exist is not to remain unchanged forever. To exist is to be, even if only for a moment, and to interact with the world in some way. The value of that moment does not depend on how long it lasts. Life may be temporary, but it is still life. A sunset may fade, but it is still beautiful. And perhaps the most real things are not the ones that last forever, but the ones we notice and appreciate while they are here.